Asheville, North Carolina, Sarah, and we had to bring her to Huntsville so that we could do this seminar because she is awesome. We've got a few more people that's going to trickle in. I'm sure the traffic has kept them back, but I just want to go over a couple things. If you need to get on the internet, use the Hilton lobby. Go to the bottom where it says promotional code, click on that, and then put in premium guest, all one word, lowercase. All right, let me tell you a little bit about Sarah. I'm gonna read this because I couldn't memorize this. I'm sorry, but Sarah's been working in web design, SEO, and social media fields since 2003 and has been teaching classes on related subjects since 2006. As president of Created Original, she has built a wide variety of small business websites over the years. She's co-founder and lead instructor of JB Media Institute. She leverages her years of experience as a digital marketing strategist to create timely, relevant, and engaging training content. Sarah speaks, trains, and presents on digital marketing topics at conferences throughout the Southeast and beyond. She received the 2017 Women Executive of the Year Award for Woman Up at the Asheville Area Chamber of Commerce. Congratulations. She's inducted into Asheville's 40 and under 40 in 2013 and graduated Leadership Asheville. She's also a 2017 graduate of Hive Global Leaders Program. She's on the board member for IAGA Asheville and on the leadership team for Community Reach. So I'm going to turn it over to her and let her entertain us all day with her wonderful knowledge.
All right, thank you so much. So welcome everyone. I'm so excited to be here today to talk about search engine optimization and then to also talk about Google Analytics this afternoon. Just so you know, we are going to take a break halfway through our morning class. So around 10:30, we'll get up and stretch and move around because we're going to be talking about some heady subjects today. Also, I really want to invite everybody today. We have slide decks that I'm going to be sharing with you. I'm also going to do some live demos today in both classes around different tools that we're using. And, you know, basically, we're going to cover a lot of ground, right, today. So what I want you to realize is you will not remember everything that I say. You will probably at some point feel like your brain is stretching a little bit into unknown, uncharted territory. And I just want you to embrace that and feel okay with the fact that you can't remember every single thing we talk about. So what I really want you to do is things that pop out for you, things that get you excited, things where you say, oh, we could do that. I could do that on the website, or we could think about content like this. That's what I really want you to pay attention to today, right? Is those things that jump out at you. There might be 1, 2, 3 things that really stand out. I always tell people when we're talking about these subjects, you want to find the place that you get most excited about to start, right? There's no right around about how you start working on these different things. What you really want to do is find the spot where you get motivated and where you feel empowered. And there may be some other things that you have to dig into more and learn more about before you can do them, and that's okay. So I'm going to be sending over to the team at Mountain Lakes Tourism Association both my slide decks. They'll send you a link in the next couple of days. So you'll be able to walk away with basically what are these ebooks about our classes today. And you can share them with anybody else you want. They'll have links inside where you can go check out all the tools that we talk about. If you have your devices today, I want to invite you to pull up your Google Analytics, to pull up your website, and to really ask questions about what you're working on. So this can really be a conversation. It's not meant for me to just talk at you, because again, these subjects, it requires actually doing it to learn it, right? So we'll talk about theories and strategies and tips and tools, but at the end of the day, the way that you're going to get more comfortable and feel more confident about doing these things is to actually do them, right? And the more that you do them, the more comfortable that you're going to feel. So I wanted to ask a quick question to start us off, and anybody can just raise their hand or jump on into the conversation. But as we talk about SEO today, which is search engine optimization, what do you know about it? What have you heard about it? What do you think about it? Does anybody have thoughts?
Secret words. Secret words.
Secret words. Anybody else?
That's about it. You know, you can use specific words that help, you know, when someone's doing a search on Google. put your business higher up.
Yeah, exactly.
Results, right?
Yeah,
you
so-
can use that,
Yeah, understanding what people are looking for.
what people are looking for
Mhm.
regarding your type of business.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else? And it can be good or bad. If you have some bad thoughts about it, that's fine too. Nothing?
I feel like most people don't understand it. That's the reason why they're having this fight. They
Yeah.
don't understand it. That's why a lot of them's not speaking up right now. We don't know enough about it to speak on the topic. So
Yeah.
we need more instruction on how to do it because it's absolutely the most important thing right now for us to get our visitors to our website,
Yeah.
our website seen. Because unless you're getting advertising right in front of them and they know to go to www.northalabama.org, we need a way for them to find us in any kind of string or search that they do. We need to be ranking higher. So
Yeah.
that's why we want it.
Yeah, awesome. So we know that it's imperative for almost everybody to think about it at least a little bit, right? One of the most common forms of optimization is for your own business name. So that when people Google your business, your website's at the top, right? So that's like usually the very baseline that most of us have to pay attention to. I don't want somebody typing in my business name or my personal name and getting another random website or another Sarah Benoit, which a lot of people will be surprised, but Benoit is like Smith in French, right? So there are a million Sarah Benoits, right? I had to work really hard to make sure when you Google that, at least in the US, I'm not going to compete in Canada or France, but in the US, I can compete to the top for my own name, right? And that way, because most of the time we know people will just Google things instead of going directly to the website, right? They'll even talk to Google and say, take me to this website, and it'll pull it right up. Any other thoughts? I will add that it's complicated. We're going to start with that today. All right, so with search engine optimization, what I want you to do today, and I know this is like slightly controversial if you know anybody else in my industry, I know that they might come up here and argue with me, but I'm going to ask you today that everything you think you know about it, throw it away, delete it, it goes in the garbage and you never think about it again, right? So whatever you think you know about search engines, whatever you think you know about Google, if it isn't from the last 6 months, it doesn't mean anything. Okay, so that's what we're going to do first today, is just bust some myths about what is search engine optimization, right? Because to me, it's something where it's really changed in the 19 years that I've been doing it. So when I started in 2003, when I opened my first company as an SEO specialist, I actually had no technical experience. There was no internet when I was in college. I was a biblical literature major. I had no idea that I would work on computers or do anything technical with my life. But as a writer, I started to see in the early 2000s that there was something about Google and something about content on websites. When I got laid off my job, I met another woman. We started a company to explore that, right? So a lot of people said to me at first, you shouldn't be in SEO. Like, you're a writer. That's not where writers belong. But I knew a bunch of programmers and they were like, no, that's where we need creatives in this world, because the people who are doing the technical end of search engine optimization at the time, which is really working on the coding of the websites, right? Those people were like, we don't want to write content. We don't want to make videos. We don't want to have to make graphics. We're going to write code. So we need a bunch of communicators to come into this world and really help us flesh out what it means to optimize your website. So even though I got laughed out of most of the meetings in like 2003 and 2004, by 2005, people started hiring us to really understand how we could take the website from sort of randomly hitting targets on search engines and really be more strategic about how we built the content, how we wrote the content, how we understood what people were searching for, right? Because that's really the key. So, to me, one of the things that I love is that this is not actually a technical thing. SEO is a communications piece. It's also a human-centered focus of how we build websites. So again, if what you thought about in the past is secret keywords and things like that, if you thought about how you can put keywords everywhere, let all that go. It's not true anymore. It hasn't been true in 10 years. Really where we're at in the world of SEO is how do we serve people better by making great websites that they love to be on, that give them all the information that they need easily and quickly. So that's actually what search engine optimization is, right? It's optimizing for the people, and there are a wide variety of pieces that go into optimizing a website. It's literally, it's not one service anymore. It's like 8 or 9 services, right? So there's all these different opportunities that we have. So a few just myths I want to bust. So actual rankings are the most important metric to measure for search engine success. So there used to be a thing where you'd say, I want to be number 1 on Google. Well, number 1 on Google is not a thing. Number 1 for me is not the same as number 1 for you. It's not the same as number 1 for you, right? Because my phone and Google cater to my behavior, my location, and what I do. So what I see at the top of Google is not going to be the same as any of you, right? And so there's no number 1 to achieve. There's no number 1 that we want to get to. Nobody is number 1 all the time, because literally the results on Google depend on where I'm standing, right? So because we've moved into a mobile first world, that we can let go of that desire to be number 1. You can also let go that Googling your own company or your own website is a way to know how you're doing. That's also completely not useful. So when you're Googling yourself and you're like, I show up at number 2, yeah, to yourself, because it's your website and you're probably on it a lot. But that does not show you at all what somebody's experiencing if they've never heard of your brand before, or they've never been to your location, or they've never visited your website, right? Also, like I said, SEO is a service that can be done once. There's this kind of belief. I've had people walk up to me and say, hey, Sarah, I need you to SEO my website. And I'm like, that's not a thing. I can't sell you that. That doesn't work like that, right? There's no one thing I'm going to do. Google, especially as a leader in the field, expects that we will always be improving our websites every week, every month, every year, for as long as our business is around, until we decide to retire and sell it for $1 million. That business should always be focused on that website, organically growing alongside it, right? Becoming better and stronger, serving people in a better way. So that's what they expect. They don't expect you to be perfect at any point. They expect you to never give up trying to do better for people. That's actually the baseline of where Google comes from. SEO is a singular service. So again, we're going to look at this, but when somebody says, I'm going to sell you search engine optimization, I would really question what they're saying to you. Because personally, as someone in the industry, there's really no search engine optimization service that we can sell. That's very 2005, right? So I understand why people are doing it, because it's a complicated world and we have to be able to sell something. But when somebody sells you an SEO package, it's really important to understand, what does that mean to them? Because what it means to them might not be what you actually need, right? So there's a lot of different SEO packages. I'm sure if you've ever gone on GoDaddy's website, you see they'll sell you for $300 a month an SEO package. That's only one tiny sliver of what needs to be done to your website, but they'll sell it as an SEO package, right? So to me, we have to dig into really how do we want to improve our websites? What do we define as awesome? How does that line up with the standards that we have coming out of Google? And then from there, hiring an SEO company or person that understands your goals is going to use the strategies that are in the SEO world to accomplish those goals, right? So another business could have different goals, and we would actually strategize in a completely different way. So this is the difference between strategizing to optimize a product website where we have an online store, to optimizing a tourism website, right? Where we're just giving out a ton of information, to optimizing a B2B, business to business website, like an accounting firm, right? Versus a retail store in downtown Huntsville, right? All of these places might optimize their websites, but how they do it will be completely different, because they're in a different industry, what they're trying to accomplish is different, and their audiences are different, right? So that's where SEO is this larger umbrella that encompasses all these different things underneath of it. And really what we're doing when we optimize our websites every month is we're looking for the best opportunities that we can take as an individual business, right? We're never going to do it all. That's impossible. Even for me, when you're a professional and it's your full-time job, you're not going to do everything that Google tells you. That's just, almost no business can accomplish that. Not even Amazon, not even BBC's website, right? Do they accomplish everything that Google says? They're just always looking for opportunities to improve and get closer and closer to Google's guidance. And then the idea that you can trick Google, right? So I was recently at an awesome talk where somebody said to me, well, give me your best guerrilla SEO tips. And I was like, make an awesome website. That's the tip. There's no gaming the system. Search engines are smarter than all of us put in this room together. If all of our brains combined into one super brain, we will not come close to the artificial intelligence that is actually running things like Google, or if you're into social media, Facebook, Instagram, TripAdvisor, right? AI runs almost all of the tools that we are using, and almost all of the tools that we're using are actually search engines in some way. So Facebook is a search engine algorithm. Instagram is a search engine algorithm. So is Google, so is Yahoo, so is Bing, so is TripAdvisor, so is Airbnb, right? All of these different tools are algorithmic technology with artificial intelligence. And there's no tricking them into thinking that your website is awesome. There is only making your website as awesome as possible at all times and knowing that you can always do better. And the more that you're on that path and you have that mindset, the more likely you are to have a website that does better over time, right? But it does mean we have to actually have some strategies and thoughts and attention put into working on the website on a monthly basis if we want to, quote unquote, optimize it. So to me, this is really what search engine optimization is. I don't like to call it a service anymore. I like to call it a mindset. And I think it's a mindset of, like I said, always wanting to improve, knowing that there's always room for improvement, and knowing that we always want to serve people to the best of our ability. And because our technology is changing, our approach is going to have to change over time. It can't be static, right? We can't just be like, I optimized the website, I'm done, right? It's like, nope, you optimized it in February, and then you did it again in March, and then you did it again in April, and you did it again in June. And like I said, that's where hopefully today what I'll inspire you to do is get excited about that instead of feeling like it's a giant burden. Because sometimes we start to feel like that content work, that optimization work, it's just never going to end. And that's true. So we want to get away from that idea that we're going to cross a finish line, right? And be able to sort of say, I got my medal, I'm done. It's more like, nope, this is a long haul. We're going to keep running for the entirety of the business, right? So that we can always be up in our game in some way. And if you look at this breakdown, these are sort of my 5 areas that I think fall under. These are like buckets of work that we do. Local search engine optimization, we're going to talk about. That's specifically for brick and mortar locations. If you have a brick and mortar location, you optimize differently than if you don't, right? There's different tools that you can use. There's different approaches. Link building is something that people often forget. So they know a lot about keywords and they think keywords are the focus. But for the whole time since Google existed, there are 2 things that build authority. Content on your website that is well written and focused on what people are looking for, which is keyword content. And the other 50% of your authority is coming out of the links that point to your website, right? So when other websites link to your website, it actually gives them credibility in the Google search engine. So one of the biggest mistakes I've seen over the years is people hyper-focused on keyword content, but nobody wanted to teach link building because it was hard to do. It's time consuming and there's no like shortcut to it. So people are like, well, we'll just talk about the keywords and we'll avoid that other thing that everybody finds really annoying and cumbersome. We're going to talk about that today because link building is so important and it's a quality versus quantity game, right? So it's not about the number of links that point to your website on its own. It's actually about how good those websites are when they point back to you. Are they credible, right? Do they have a lot of traffic? Do people stay on them and engage for a long time? The more high quality websites that link back to you, the better your own website will do, right? So there's a way that you can work together, even amongst yourselves as you live in this region, to link to each other and actually help each other build that profile of links. And then we get into keyword architecture and markup. Keyword architecture is really about the content piece, doing the keyword research. We're going to do that live today so that we can actually have some fun with the tools and talk about how it works. But that's really making sure that every part of your website is really intuitive for people, right? That it's easy for them to navigate and that it reflects what people are actually searching for. Markup is like the more technical end of that. That's when you get into having somebody write into your code different things so it will display a certain way on the Google results. So if you started to search Google today, and feel free to do this as we're talking about this, if you went to Google and just started searching things, you'd see that there's different types of results, right? There's local listings, there's product listings, there's organic listings. Inside of organic, we see video, we see photos, and sometimes we even see things like reviews that pop up with them, right? Or we'll see a little call out number, or we'll see these different extensions that are basically part of a markup, right? And again, that you need to really talk to a coding person for your website because they're gonna have to code that into the back end, but it's usually in direct relationship to the sort of public facing keyword work that you're doing. And then the last piece is usability. So again, this is something not enough people talk about. The usability of your website now directly impacts whether or not you are going to do well in the search engine. So let's say in 2006, I could just stuff a bunch of keywords everywhere and I could get websites up higher. That's because the AI was not fully what it is today. So I can manipulate the system a little bit more. But as we've gotten into artificial intelligence, being able to track all the minutia of people's behavior, what we find is that there are standards for how a website performs for people, right? How fast does it load? Are people clicking on multiple pages? Are they staying on the pages? And if so, how long are they staying? Those types of things are also affecting how high you show up. So this is why it's important to realize I can put lots of keywords on my website, but if it's not usable, if it's loading slow, if I'm stuffing keywords in places they shouldn't be because they're hidden, if I'm doing that stuff now, Google's actually going to penalize me, right? It's going to tell me these are not the best practices. So we really want to think about that usability piece, and I'll give you some really good tips on that. So we're going to talk a lot about Google this morning, just as we're starting this conversation on what is search engine optimization. And I just wanted to show you why we're going to talk about Google, because all the other search engines are those colored lines on the bottom, and that very top line is Google. So when it comes to searches, depending on which country and which device we're talking about, they hold somewhere between 91 and 98% of the search volume, right? So just for the record, it's not to say Google is the only search engine. It's not. There's Yahoo, there's Bing, there's things like DuckDuckGo, especially in this world where we're talking about privacy and security. There's search engines that have come out where they have no tracking of what you're doing. But the truth is, at the end of the day, almost all those search engines hardly ever crack 10% of the market. So Google is the big player, and I might be slightly obsessed with them over the last 20 years. But their technology is the leading technology on the planet, right? And they have a lot of things that they're leading technology on. So Google has a bunch of things. I won't go into every single one because there'd be thousands of things for us to talk about when we're looking at what we call ranking factors, right? So Google often informs us on what goes into, they won't tell us exactly how the algorithm works. That's always their secret, but they'll tell us a lot about what goes into it and what they're prioritizing in their technology, right? So again, there's thousands and thousands of ranking factors that their system is looking at, but we can drop these into a bunch of buckets. So the first one is the purpose of the page. So when I build websites, I tell everybody, Google doesn't rank your website. Google ranks every page of your website. So every page of your website is potentially a doorway into your site. It's not just your homepage. Not everybody comes into your website through the homepage. Sometimes they come through the services pages or the about pages, or they come through the blog if you have one, right? So every page of your website has to have a clear purpose. We don't want to be creating content for content's sake. We really want to be thinking about if this was the first thing somebody saw when they came to the website, what would we want them to do when they got there, right? So it's about being clear, not just with ourselves, but with the people that are going to be there. Also, main content quality and amount. So there is a basic principle that the larger your website is, the better content you have, the more content you have, the more you're going to stimulate the search engine. And that is true. Bigger websites tend to rank for more things. Smaller websites tend to rank for less things. So that because of that, it's basically just an opportunity game, right? If I'm blogging more, if I have more pages on the website, if I talk more about services and get specific about them on the website, what I'm going to find is I'm creating more opportunities to show up in Google. If my website's only 5 pages and I leave it that way for a long time, we're going to hit a wall at some point, right? We're like, there's nothing else that those 5 pages can show up for unless we keep expanding the content, right? So there is that basic game of just looking at the main content quality and the amount of that. And then Google loves us to focus on something called EAT, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. And this is the part of their algorithm and their AI where they're trying to combat people just getting on the internet and saying whatever they want, right? So, I mean, I know freedom of speech, this is America. We can get on the internet and say whatever we want. But what Google would like us to think about is, especially for businesses and brands, how can we actually make sure that what we're saying is accurate, useful, helpful to people? We don't want to get up there and say we have a product that we don't have. We don't want to make claims that our products and services can do things that they really can't do. That's just basic business ethics, right? So this is where Google kind of steps into an ethical conversation. And they have some real specifics about this that I'll talk about in a minute. And then website information and website reputation. So this is where we're going to talk a little bit about this, especially with local SEO. But if you're doing social media, if you have an email newsletter, if you are putting content on other websites in any way, partnering with other websites to publish things in other places, it's really important to understand that it's a holistic perspective, right? So Google sees your website and it's making a judgment about the content there and the quality of the site. It's also looking at every single other thing that you do on the web as sort of an ecosystem. And whatever you're doing off of your website is also affecting the website's authority, right? So this is where if you have a Twitter and you haven't put up a tweet in like 6 years, but it's linking over to your website, I mean, truly get rid of it or start using it at least once a month so that Google doesn't see that you have a social media platform sitting out there that hasn't been updated in 5 years. Because that's a reflection on the credibility of the whole sort of holistic kind of presence that you have online. So even though social media doesn't necessarily optimize your website, it does have an impact, right? Because it's a link over to the site, it might be driving traffic to the site. So another good example is, let's say you have people on Facebook clicking over to your website, but when they get there, it loads too slow. So let's say it loads in 7 seconds, which I know is painful. The standard is 3, so that's more than double the standard. So let's say it loads in 7 seconds, so people keep bouncing, right? They come from Facebook, the website's too slow, so they leave immediately. Google's actually paying attention to that. It's like, why does everybody on Facebook hate it when they click over? Something's wrong, right? So they're paying attention, like I said, to that whole ecosystem that you're building. So that's why it's important to think of your website, your social, your email, all the other things that you're doing. You're listing on your local chamber website or DMO's website. You want to make sure those things are accurate, up to date. They have the right name, phone number, address, right? Link to your website. Everything is consistent. And the purpose of each page, we're going to talk about this later today when we go into Google Analytics. But to me, what you're going to find in understanding purpose of pages is some pages of your website are great for SEO and some are not. So a perfect example of this is I might optimize a whole section, let's say on the Mountain Area Tourism website, about places to stay. I could research how people look for that. I could really optimize that section. We might show up and get more organic search results from that. But I'm not going to go to their contact page and stuff a bunch of keywords in there and try to optimize it. Because the contact page should genuinely only be showing up when people are like, contact this organization. That's when it's actually relevant to that, right? So we're not trying to take every single page on the website. We might find that some pages are really primed and ready. A lot of times this is where I'm looking at the services area of the website, the products on the website, the about section, the home page, because I know those are prime targets where we're already talking about what we do. And so we could probably do some keyword research and refine that content to be clearer and attract the right people, right? So this is something that Google really focuses on. When you get the slide deck, you'll see at the bottom, there's something called the Search Quality Rating Program Guidelines. If you want to become ultra geeky and dig into like the longest document of your lifetime to read about Google's explanation of what they call page quality, this is something that I find really fascinating, because what it really shows you is that what I said before is true, right? Google just wants us to create great content on great websites. That's the ultimate goal for them, right? And so every page of our website is an opportunity to do this. Even though that sounds overwhelming, I have to optimize every page, or I have to think about it. You know, actually, it's going to lighten your burden, because the truth is you can go look at the top 5 pages that are showing up in Google for your website, and then you can work on those first, right? So it's never about doing everything at once. Google wants to see us every month, every quarter, every year, just making progress. And so we can do it 1 page at a time if that's all the time we have, right? We don't have to try to do 20 pages in 1 month. We can just do 1 page a month. And if we were doing that for the next 2 years, we would actually see results in the long term. So what are the common purposes of pages on your website? This is something you can be thinking about today when you look at your own website. What is each page for, right? So what is the home page for? What is the about page for? If you have multiple services, what are those pages for? It's really just asking that question. If we don't know the answer to the question, I'll tell you right now, the people visiting your website, they don't know either. So we really, as the people that are running websites, and especially those of us who are building them, we really have to think about this. One of the things that you'll learn pretty quickly when you're talking to web designers is not all web designers know anything about search engine optimization. It's actually a completely different field. So it's important sometimes if you're working with a designer or developer where this is not their expertise, that you can have somebody else come in and work with them to sort of guide them on some things. And I do that a lot with web designers where they're building the website, but I'm guiding a little bit of the strategy to make sure that we've really created something where the purpose of our pages are clear and that we know what our opportunities are going to be. So essentially, a lot of times I like to just brainstorm this with clients, right? Just write it out on a piece of paper, right? Taking a look at what are the pages on there, what are the most important pages we think are on there, why do we think those pages are important? Then I'm going to look at analytics to back up and prove if our assumptions about what the most important pages of the site are true. Because we can guess and come up with ideas, but then we actually look what people are doing and we learn if we're even close to understanding what's going on. And inside of websites, the main content is usually what you're reading right on the front end, right? But there are different parts of a site that can be called supplementary content, or if you're running ads or you're monetizing your website in other ways. Most of us are just working with main content. That's really the focus. But again, as you grow a website, as you do different things, as your company becomes bigger, if you grow into a giant, like I said, multi-million-dollar corporation down the road, you'd start to explore different opportunities. And so bigger websites have other sections that Google treats differently, right? So not all content is the same. Like I said, main content is really that content that's upfront to the public. It's a thing when somebody clicks on about, or they click on a service, or they click on places to stay, they're going to see right there all this information. That's really the top opportunity I think most of us have. Other types of content, like I said, are going to require things in the code that are going to require more technical work. And so you don't necessarily need to worry about that. And then this is just a quick checklist, like I said, of quality factors. So really having somebody edit your website is a good idea. If you're the one who wrote it, this is like everything else in the world. Once you've written all the content, you should not be the one to edit it, because your brain is like over it at that point. It's really good to have somebody else eyeball content, make sure that everything looks great, make sure that links are working, buttons are working, everything is functional. It's really important to be straightforward and to the point about content. You can write long form content, but you'll notice on websites that do really well, they're very scannable, which means I can hit a page and scan through the headings and understand the main points and then decide if I want to read more. And that's because the vast majority of us, there's about 8% of people in the world that are detailed and they must read everything before they make decisions. So we want to give them all the information, but the other 92% of us have like 2 seconds to care about whatever we're doing. And we're going like this. right? So we just want to scroll through, get the main point, and that allows us to decide if we're digging deeper. So that's where we really want pages to be scannable and easy to digest, right? This is where we see a lot of websites now having video, different types of graphics, and because visual content is sometimes easier to absorb than, let's say, 3 paragraphs. But this is where we really want to get away from writing websites the way we would like an essay in school, because nobody wants that on the internet. Right? If you want to write an essay, you have a button where you can download something that long and read that from that perspective. There's a few exceptions. I have worked with clients where their target audience is scientists. And I will say, scientists, if that's your audience, they will read like 10 pages of white with black text and no headings at all, because that's what they do for a living. But outside of the scientists, I haven't met a lot of people that want that sort of long form without being able to scan through and just see the main headings, kind of see some bullet points and easily digest the main part of it. And then, of course, a lot of stuff is just about being factual, being accurate. Again, Google is looking at this. If you're saying things on your website that other people are saying on other websites, it's not true. You're going to run into some issues because the AI is smart enough to see that discrepancy, right? And that's going to basically affect the EAT, right? The expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. And then if you're doing like an online store and things like that, you're going to see there's additional things with shopping websites where you really want to make sure that your shopping cart and everything works well. I often tell people, when you have a system on your website where people are actually purchasing things, once you build it, you should actually go buy stuff from yourself, right? A lot of times people skip that step. And I'm like, so you're willing to put your website out there and ask everybody else to do this process that you were not even willing to try yourself? No, go through, see how easy it is, right? How fast do they get to the products? You know, how well organized is your online store? That's really going to affect the experience. And then if you're doing any types of gaming or interactive things, polls on your website, or you're asking people to submit information, maybe you have them doing a download of some kind, or they're signing up for an itinerary, or they're signing up for a contest or something of that nature, right? All of those types of things, we really want to make sure if those are on our page that they all work. So we need to just go in and test it when we set those types of things up. And like I said, EAT, this is where, again, Google takes a holistic view. So it is looking at the content on the website, but it's also looking at the creator of the content, the brand, and what's being said about you on the web, and what kind of links are pointing back to the website. And so it's not just about the quality of the content. Like I said, it's about the quality of the whole ecosystem that we're building. So that's where I feel like in SEO, a lot of times we focus so heavily on content, and then we spend all this time making more pages, doing keyword research and all of this. And then 6 months later, it's like, well, we got some results. And I'm like, well, that's because we did like half the work. We didn't do all the work, unfortunately, right? We did the first step, which is making our own keyword architecture and content strong. Then we didn't go into the next phase, which should have been things like link building, right? Which should have been things like evaluating all of our other social media and things to make sure everything is accurate and pointing to the right places. EAT also gets harder if you're in certain industries. And so you can all let me know if you're in any of these industries. But if you're working in anything medical related, if you're in anything journalism related, if you're in anything that's science-based, and if you're in anything that's basically like financial, legal, taxes, those are all regulated industries. So you're going to get judged more harshly anytime you're talking about these topics. Or if you were, let's say, like an accountant, a tax attorney, things like that, those websites are being judged at a deeper level because they are affected by regulatory stuff. And they are basically things that Google has identified that we can't just run around making random claims, right? I can't make a homemade like lotion and then be like, this lotion is going to make you look like you did when you were 21, right? I can't get away with that. Google's going to be like, that's not real. You're not allowed to say that. That's sensational, right? It's not actually factual. And so we see there's a lot of areas where we really want to be thoughtful when we're talking about things. And for larger tourism websites, I will just say that we have to be careful because a lot of times we're covering all sorts of topics. right? So our communities will have all sorts of things we want to talk about, businesses and events and things like that. So whenever we start dipping into these categories of like news, or like I said, things that are health and wellness related, medical related, we just want to be careful about how we're talking about that stuff, and that we don't give Google the impression that we're kind of just, smoke and mirrors on what the value of stuff is, that we're being pretty accurate and factual. And this even digs into things, so it's interesting. EAT is associated with some of these regulated industries, but then because so many of us are giving each other advice online, right? So I might build my own bookshelf and I make a video about how I did it and I put it on YouTube and a bunch of people watch it. It's really popular, right? Those type of things can happen. So Google's also looking at these things where people are giving each other advice and judging them as well. So even if you're not a business in a regulated industry, if you are just out there providing information, there is some level at which the AI is going to be able to sort of pass a judgment, right, on the quality of what you're doing, the trustworthiness of what you're doing. So we see this with things like home remodeling, with parenting issues, when it comes to things like hobbies. So if I'm going to start doing live streams about how to play guitar, or I'm going to do live streams about or video content about how to build a pond in my backyard, right? Those types of things. As I'm putting that content out there, Google is definitely judging how accurate and useful that information is. And that's often judged by people's behavior. So how long are people watching the video? Are they then clicking over to something else? Right? Are they leaving comments? What are they doing? So it's not just on our own websites that's judged. Again, it's sort of an ecosystem judgment about what's happening on the web that Google is doing. And this is where Google is almost always changing and improving and changing and improving, right? Because they're really trying to figure out how to filter out things that aren't trustworthy and make sure that the things that are trustworthy and expert related and authoritative end up at the top, higher up. And so this is something where I feel like their AI is constantly learning. Does everybody understand how artificial intelligence works? A little bit? I see some people aren't quite sure. So for the record, AI learns, right? So it's like us to a certain extent. Although, I mean, eventually it might be the Terminator, but right now it's similar to us in a way that as it watches what people do online, it's actually learning about their behavior. Right? And from their behavior, it's learning about what it should be showing at the top. And it does that by showing things at the top and then seeing how many people click on them. And when it's getting the majority of the people to click, the AI is like, yay, I understand what they're talking about, right? So just like a human being, the AI brain actually learns from behavior and it adjusts things over time, right? And so a good example of this on social media, so if you're in like Facebook, right? It's interesting how, so let's say you're dating somebody for 2 years. As you're interacting with that person, the Facebook AI is learning that you hang out with them a lot. So, oh, there's lots of pictures, and oh, you guys were in the same place, and oh, your phones were sitting next to each other for 3 weeks, right? So it's like learning about that behavior. When you break up and you stop hanging out and you stop tagging each other, you might stay friends on Facebook, but the AI learns, oh, you don't want to see that guy anymore. Right? You don't want to see that girl anymore. You're not going over that house anymore, right? So it's going to start to remove that person from your feed when 6 months ago, that person was always in your feed, right? So if you have a fight with your friend, if you have a fight with your sister, you will actually see the AI can learn that and track it and watch it and adjust what's showing up for you in Facebook based on that behavior. So that's exactly how Google works, right? It's looking at what you search for, who you're standing next to, how you're searching for things, which websites you click on, which websites you click on and stay longer on, which videos you watch, how long you watch them, what things are you sharing, what things are you sending to your friends, right? All of that stuff is being wrapped in. And then they are basically deciding what shows up in the Google system for you based on all of that, right? So there's a lot that goes into them understanding the behaviors. And then there's something called your money, your life, right? YMYL. And this is another category area in search engine optimization where we want to be thoughtful, because this is where, again, they get very judgy, right? Because it has a lot to do with people talking about their own experiences, right? Their day-to-day experience, how they enhance their lives And a lot of times, again, we end up touching on things like shopping, financial information, medical information. If you're going to government websites and doing different things, right? Paying your water bill, paying your electric bill, doing these different activities that a lot of us do online. Basically, Google is watching all of that as well. And we're allowed to share some experience about that. But when a business or an organization starts to create a website where it's going to talk about what to do to improve your health, what to do to improve your finances, Google is going to be hyper critical of websites that address those issues, right? So again, it goes back to the idea of advice, but advice about certain things that are day-to-day life things, they're going to be more critical of that you are accurate and that you are telling the truth, right? Because they don't want people, again, to be able to, especially businesses, they don't want businesses to be able to get online, build a website and just say whatever they want is the truth. They're like, no, especially when it comes to whether or not people should invest in something, whether or not they should get a test for something medically, whether or not they should, go to a doctor for a certain purpose. Those types of conversations, we have to try to figure out a way to maintain accuracy and to maintain a certain level of credibility, things like that, right? So any website that gets deemed a YMYL website, a lot of times when they come to me and I can see they're providing information about politics or government or health and wellness, it's like I have to think even at a different level about how we're going to make sure that what we're building on the website is really accurate and sourced, right? That means I'm going to have more links to things that prove that what we're saying is true. I'm going to put more energy into that piece of it so that I can meet Google standards. So any questions just about how Google works? Like I said, there's thousands of other things we could talk about in relationship to Google, but I feel like those are some of the big buckets that they're constantly looking at and talking about as far as what we should pay attention to. But I think the bottom line is, again, we want to serve people. We want to give them information on our website that's super useful, super helpful, is easily accessible on any device. And we want to make sure that it's something that they can really trust and believe in, right? If we do that as businesses, and again, I want to be clear, we're talking about businesses and brands today. So as far as individually, like I said, this is the US. You can get on the internet and say whatever you want if it's you, right? If it's you personally on your Twitter, you can say whatever you want. That's a totally different ballgame in some ways, right? But when we establish ourselves as businesses and brands, that's where we kind of move into a different level of understanding around how Google is judging what we're doing, right? So even personal blogs can sometimes live in this like gray area where, if I'm just blogging for my own personal reasons to build a following, if I just want to say crazy stuff and like let it all fly, that's okay, right? And Google's going to have certain ways of approaching that. But as soon as I start saying I'm a company, I'm a business, I'm an organization, right? I'm here to serve people. As soon as I step into that world, Google starts to say, all right, we've got different standards for that than we do for just individual people. And again, influencers, it's interesting. They live in this gray area where sometimes they start out in the personal world and then they cross over into the brand, right? As they get more of a following, as their blog grows, they end up with thousands of visitors a month. Google's going to actually start to judge their blog a little differently because they're like, well, you have a lot of people on here, so you have to be a lot more responsible about what you're saying and how you're saying it and whether or not you have any proof that what you're saying is true. Any thoughts on this? Good. Just want to make sure there's no questions. All right, so what I want to jump into is actually the keyword research this morning. So I think this part is, now some of you might watch me do this and you'll end this class and be like, I never want to see that again. I hate it. And I just want to give you permission, but that's okay. Not everybody is a keyword dork. I've started out a writer. So I feel like language is one of my passions. And so keywords and keyword research is something I get really excited about. But the reason I get excited about it is because really what it is market research, right? It's not actually about the words, it's about the people and it's about understanding them better. And so that's where, to me, if you really care about people and really care about your customers and your audiences, then keyword research should be a way to more deeply connect with them, right? It's not just a boring sort of research project. It's really how we get to know each other on some level. because there's going to be some customers and people that maybe you never get to meet, you never get to talk to them. Maybe some people end up on your website, you're never personally going to know them. But when we look at keyword research, we can start to understand a little bit more about what people actually want. And so this is where, when we talk about keyword research, a lot of times I just want people to think about all we're doing is connecting with people's motivations and their intentions, right? We're trying to understand why they're doing things. That's kind of the big question in digital marketing, right? We kind of know what people are doing. We know how they're doing it. And the next big thing that we want to crack is why are they doing it? Why are some people clicking on these things? Why are some people clicking on these things? Right? So this is where data, which we're going to talk about this afternoon, is becoming more and more important, because we're trying to figure out how do we get to that why, and how do we do it without sacrificing privacy and security, which we talked about earlier, is becoming a bigger conversation. So a lot of this is really around how do we kind of understand the search intent when people are looking for things. What are they doing? But more so, why are they doing it? Why are they doing it a certain way? There's 3 buckets automatically that we know are intent for people when they're searching on a search engine. One is informational or investigative. And if you think about this, how many of you are familiar with the customer journey? Has anybody ever, just put your hand up, who's ever thought about that, learned about it a little bit? A few of you, all right? So the customer journey, if you think back, let's go back to the 80s, right? When we talked about customer experience, a lot of times what people showed you was a funnel, right? So people have lots of options, and then they whittle it down and whittle it down and whittle it down, and then eventually they purchase, right? So it just goes like a reverse triangle. So that is not true. The internet wrecked that entirely. And it's really not how it works. Most of us now understand that rather than funnels, what most people are doing is a circle. It's called the customer journey. And in that journey, a lot of times what happens is people start out with 1 or 2 options. They talk to everybody on the internet, they read reviews, they look at articles, and they actually expand the options. And then they keep talking to people and reading things, and then they retract the options, and then they make a purchase, then they decide how they felt about it. And if they had a good time and it was a great experience, they might go into what we call a circle inside of a circle, which is called the loyalty loop, which means now I'm going to keep going back to the same provider because I had a great experience. If I didn't have a good experience, I'll go back into that larger circle and I'll reevaluate my options. But instead of a bunch of options to 1 option, we actually are like a few options, all the options in the world, back to a few options, right? So inside of that customer journey circle, I usually tell people there's funnels that pop off of that whole circle, depending on where people are at, right? So in the beginning of that circle, people might be looking for information. They might be investigating their options. They're just doing their research, right? And there might be some funnels where they download a free, ebook about something, or they watch videos about something, right? So there's these little funnels where we're capturing different leads in different places. And then as they keep continuing through that circle, they're going to actually get more into transactional intent, right? Because as they get through their decision-making process, they start to get closer and closer to actually making a purchase or buying a ticket or signing up for something and registering for something. In the middle of that, the navigational intent, that's really when you've just done such good PR and such good marketing overall that people just know your name. So again, a lot of people just go to Google and type in exactly what they're looking for instead of going directly to their website, or they talk to Google, right? And they're just like, take me to this website, and it takes them directly there. And so we know that really these are kind of the 3 places where people's intentions behind what they're searching for sit. And so this is important, I think, because you're going to create some content on your website that's educational and informative for the people that are at the beginning of their customer journey. But you're also going to need some content and some things on your website for people who are ready to buy. Right? So for most of us, we have at least 2 basic audiences. People who know about us and people who don't. People who know about us are, number one, more likely to give us money because they already did. More likely to convert in a number of different ways because they already trust us, know us, are familiar with us, right? But they also need to get things faster because they don't need to read a whole bunch of stuff about your company if they already bought something from your company, right? So we don't want to take people who already know about us and put them through this long journey right? That they've already been on, because that's actually going to chase them away. And for people who are new and just heard about our business or just found us, we need to give them that information so they can make a decision. So this goes back to purpose of your pages, right? Some of your pages might be for new people. Some of your pages might be for existing customers, right? And so we want to think about how our websites are serving at least those two basic audiences. How many of you have ever tested your website like on the phone? Like you've gone to your own website, you've clicked through things, you've really seen like, what does it look like? What's going on? Just put your hand up really quick. Awesome. A+ to all of you today. For that, you'd be amazed at how many people have never looked at their website on the phone. I'm like, you have to do that because like a lot of people are coming through the phones these days, right? So we need to make sure that what they see on a larger screen and what they see on a smaller screen is going to work. But one of my favorite things that Google did, and this was probably, was at least 5 years ago, might have been 7. So I feel like I lost 20 and 21. I don't know. I keep thinking 2019 was last year, but anyway, Google did this great study about what people are doing on their phones. And I just thought this was really helpful in understanding that they kind of found 4 key buckets in the customer journey. And that's I want to know, I want to go, I want to do, and I want to buy, right? And so you can see some of this is investigative, some of this is transactional. I want to go and I want to buy are transactional. I want to do and I want to know are going to go more in investigative and educational, right? I want to do can sort of fall in between transactional, investigative. But I just love this because when I'm working on websites, since they put this study out, I really try to think about these pieces and how they relate to the website I'm building. And do I have pages on the website that serve these purposes or sections of the website that serve these purposes? Because especially on mobile results, if I can satisfy the fact that most people using their phone have some type of desire that falls into one of these buckets, I'm really now creating a website that caters a little bit more to what they want to do. And in analytics, we'll talk about how you can see how many people are using mobile devices versus computers, right? Because that's actually right in your data. You can know, is it 40% of your visitors? Is it 20%? Is it 80%? Right? I would say most businesses nowadays, they're definitely at 35 to 40% most of the time. Only rarely do I see a site where, like, let's say it's below that. And a lot of my clients, when it comes to mobile traffic, we're at 50 or 60% minimally most of the time. So the phone, the tablet, that stuff is not going away anytime soon. And it really affects, I think, how we have to approach websites. When I started building websites, we always looked at it on the big screen. And then we like worked it down to how it would look on a phone as phones got more and more popular. Now, really, if you're designing correctly, you do the opposite, right? You start with a little version and then you build out to the bigger version because we know typically the phone size version is actually going to be the most dominantly used, right? So that's like a big reframe over the years of how we've done things. So SEO strategy really, like I said, comes into, I think, kind of 5 areas. We're going to go through these today in class: keyword research, content strategy, usability, building links to your website. And then we are going to touch a little bit on SEO tracking and reporting at the end of this morning's class. But again, we're going to deep dive into that this afternoon so we can really look at what it means. So keyword research, like I said, this is where I get very geeky. I've done thousands of hours of keyword research in the last 20 years for all sorts of different industries. And like I said, because I'm a writer, I love it because when I do keyword research, I can often come up with enough content ideas to last like 2 years in one round of research. And I don't just use those ideas for the website. We think about how we're going to build the website out. And then that goes into our email marketing, our social media, our advertising campaigns, right? Because now that we understand what people want better, we can actually do better across the board, not just on the actual information we're putting on the website. And so keyword research to me, again, when you go through this later on, there's lots of different details in here and how to approach things. But I think the key things to remember are, one, how many of you have done like customer avatars or some type of, customer personas or audience personas? Anybody done that work where you've outlined like who are the people that you're trying to target? Awesome. All right, so everybody needs to do that. Like when you started your business. But, but that's something that you can always revisit, right? Which is we want to know who we're targeting before we start any of these marketing efforts, right? So who do we want to attract? Again, if we're just talking about like the tourism world in general, I feel like, it's very broad, right? We can attract everybody. I live in Asheville. We're attracting everybody. We want you, if you're just turned 21 and you want to drink in like 14 breweries, I don't really want those people, but I know that we're marketing to them. And then we've got people that are retired that are coming to like take a break and go be up in the mountains and escape the city and, hide away in a cabin, right? So we've got these really distinct audiences. Those people are searching for completely different things, right? So this is where, especially if you're a smaller business, you really want to think about who are your audiences, your niches, your segments, because you're going to want to actually do research about each of those groups of people. You can't do broad research because it's really not going to tell you very much about what you should do. So we really start with who are these specific people that we want to bring in. It might be people that are already great clients for you, right? So for me, when I build websites, it's funny, I love very small businesses. I hate building large websites. It's a nightmare. I don't like doing it. It's funny when somebody comes to me, they're like, I have $10,000 for a website. I'm like, get out of here. I'm like, I don't even want to talk to you. I'm like, $10,000 websites are super annoying and drive me crazy. I'd rather build a $3,000 website because I know it's going to be simple, straightforward. It's a starting point. So I work with lots of solopreneurs. I work with lots of startups who are putting up their first website, right? So I know that kind of micro enterprise is my target for websites. I need to create content specifically for people in that space and research exactly what it is that people look for when they're getting ready to build their first website, right? Because I want to attract those people. If you've got a corporation with a giant website that you rebuilt, that is not what my company does. I'm going to refer you to somebody with a much bigger team and who has a lot more time and isn't teaching 40 hours a week already, right? Because they're going to have the energy to put into that. So really thinking not just about like who are the people I want to attract, but who are my best customers? How can we try to get more of those types of people? And then also thinking about what new markets do you want to open up? So what are groups of people that you're not serving yet that you wish you were serving more? So I know over the years, I've had a lot of companies come to me and say, we want the younger people. How do we get the younger people? How do we get the millennials? How do we get the Gen Zers, right? And so we have to talk about what are those people searching for? What kind of things are they looking for online? Because it might be very different than what maybe our baby boomer audience is looking for online, right? Because they're using the internet in slightly different ways. So really thinking about that. Who are the people that you want to attract before you get into the research? Brainstorm that. And then a lot of times I like to make a list of what do I think people are searching for, right? If people are finding us, what do I think they're typing in? If we want people to find us more often, what do we want them to find us for? And I'm just going to brainstorm that right out, right? To get my brain sort of started and thinking from a search perspective. And there might be variations and synonyms. So the example I always use is that the word lawyer and the word attorney for most people in America are interchangeable. Because of our behavior in interchanging those terms, the Google artificial intelligence also knows that most of us are exchanging those terms. So I don't need to optimize my website for lawyer on one page and then optimize my website for attorney on another page. That's how I would have done it in 2004. And then the search engine got smarter. So the search engine knows those things are the same thing, right? So I can optimize for both of those types of phrasing in one page or on multiple pages, because Google's going to understand that people are looking for both things with those two different phrases, right? So that's where the AI is super smart and it understands our language and how language works. So a lot of times once I do my first idea of like products and services that we want to show up for, then I'll kind of do another round of just brainstorming. Okay, what are other ways that we could say this that I haven't thought of yet? Right? What are other ways that we could potentially be showing up? Because how I search for it might not be how other people search for it, right? So looking at those synonyms can be super helpful. And then we're going to look at a great tool called moz.com. That's my favorite one, personally. Ahrefs and SEMrush also have free versions that you can use, but these are great tools for researching both your keyword phrases, what people are typing in, as well as researching competition. So being able to see when you put in a phrase, what other websites are already dominating on page one. So again, a good example of this is I worked in a hotel in Asheville with a hotel there. They're one of the oldest hotels in the city. When they first met with me, they said, well, we want to show up for Asheville hotels. And I was like, well, that's not a thing. Like we literally can't do that. And they were like, but why? Because we're the oldest hotel. We're super cool. We're right downtown. Can anybody guess why like one hotel cannot show up for Asheville Hotel? Like, what do you think is showing up at the top instead? Any ideas?
Probably.
Almost. Exactly. Right? So Holiday Inn isn't even up there for Asheville Hotel. Kayak, hotels.com, TripAdvisor, Google themselves, where you can just book your hotel right through Google, right? They're dominating page one. So no one hotel can compete, or even one hotel chain can compete with a website that has thousands of hotel options for that phrase. And I'm like, so unless we have the money to compete against the biggest players in the hotel market, we're never getting to page one of Asheville hotels at this point, right? Especially because our city is a massive tourism city. So the few local websites that are even bumping into that are Explore Asheville, and there's one other website called romanticasheville.com. They've both been around so long that they compete a little tiny bit on that top page. But most of the time they're getting bumped out because of all the different types of sites now where I can plan my trips, where there's just thousands and thousands of listings, right? And so for a site that's that big and that authoritative, my one hotel site it can't compete, right? So we're gonna have to look for other ways that people look for hotels and see if there's other opportunities for us to engage. So this is where with a lot of hotels that I've worked with, we're looking at the more specific amenities that people search for, right? We're looking for location searches. We're looking for searches about bringing a dog to the hotel. We're looking for searches about swimming pools in the hotel, right? We're looking for those type of things where we could build out content, show up for something much more specific, because we're not going to be able to compete for those really broad topics because they're already dominated by companies much bigger than ours. The other thing that we'll talk about in analytics that's super helpful is if you already have data, you can look at what you're already ranking for. And so with most of my clients, when we're doing SEO, we go find out where is your website already on page 3, 4, 5, right? Or maybe 2, right? Because if you've made it all the way up to page 2 or 3, 4 or 5, I can maybe move you higher up to page 1, right? Or to page 2 where you'll get more traffic from Google. But if you're on page 147, we have a long road ahead of us to take the website from all the way out there to closer to the top, right? So we're always looking for sort of what rankings already exist. And again, we'll look at examples of how to see this so that you can actually look at that in your own data. So these are my favorite keyword tools. You can, when you get the slide deck, you can click on any of these. Is anybody in here doing Google Ads? Or have a company doing Google Ads for them? A little bit. So Google Ads, I will say, has their own keyword tool. It's free. I wouldn't say it's very easy to use, which is why I'm not going to show it to you, because it's really complicated. You have to kind of get comfortable with Google Ads to use it. But if you have an ad company that's running your Google advertising, they can often do research for you and then like pull that information in. And the one plug I will give the Google Ads tool is that it allows you to choose a location. So I can actually say, I want to know what people search for in Huntsville versus Birmingham, right? So when I get into doing work, I love that tool because it really will tell me not just what people are searching in the US, but what they're searching right down to a specific geographical location. Most of the other tools you're going to see, you don't get that location stuff very often. And if you do, you've probably paid quite a high price to get access to it. So some of the tools like SEMrush and Ahrefs and things like that, those tools are $150, $200, $300 a month, right, to use them. But it's because they're giving you special data. But like I said, my favorite tool is Moz. It's called the Keyword Explorer. But there's a few others that are free that are also awesome. Keyword Tool.io, Answer the Public, which is a really fun one. We'll take a look at that really quick before the break. And Uber Suggest. Uber Suggest is a tool that's been around for a long time. It's pretty popular. And again, a lot of these you can get free trials. So you can do some research on your own. But I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the Moz tool today. I'm going to give you a tip. So when you go to moz.com and you try to sign up, they're going to be like, sign up for your 30-day trial. And they're going to try to get you to put your credit card in so that you have to cancel it 30 days later. And I will say, if you want to do a lot of SEO work, it's great to have a tool like this. You can always use it, do a ton of research the first month, and then kill that thing before they start charging you. I've done that with a ton of small businesses who, we just make a research month once a year, and we pay them for 1 month, and then we're out. And so you can utilize that in that way. But one of the secrets to the Moz tool is you can actually create a free account. So if I go just to moz.com and then I click log in, you'll see right here on the main homepage how it says try Moz Pro for free. So don't let them sucker you into that. Click on to log in. And then if you don't have a username and password, it says create an account. That's how you get a free account on their site to use all their free tools. Like I said, they hide it deep in here, but then you'll be able to do everything that I'm just about to show you, right? Because this is my free account that I'm using. So I'm going to go ahead and log into the back end. And like I said, they have a whole section on their website called free tools. The Keyword Explorer is part of that, where you can do your keyword research. And so that's why I love to be able to have this free account to play with. It's going to give me limited information, but most of the time for smaller companies, it gives us really good keyword data, especially to play with. And let's see if this will let me log in. I'll make sure I'm still, there we go. All right, so this is sort of the list of tools that they're giving me, and you'll see right here, there's a link at the top, free SEO tools. So I can click there, or I can just go directly from this little dashboard. This is my Keyword Explorer. And so here is basically where I can type in a keyword phrase. So I would love somebody here who would like me to do some research about what they do. So jump in. What do you want to search for? Look, I'll take 2. What did you say? Ship museums and what?
Like Guntersville. Like Guntersville?
Well, so is that what you want to show up for? Like when people are searching?
Yeah.
Like it's what you want, you think the customer is typing in?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
That's all right.
All right, so let's start with the broader one. Ship museum. I'm just going to click analyze. And just so you know, on the free tool, they do limit you to how many topics you can search. I think it's about 10 a month. So they'll count down for you. They're like, you've used up all your searches. But if you do a little bit of research every month, you'll end up with a lot of great information. So once I put that in, if I scroll down, I get sort of 2 options: keyword suggestions and SERP analysis. So SERP analysis is where it's going to show me what websites are already showing up for this really strongly. So what websites are already doing well? We can see right here, the first one is Wikipedia, right? Then there's a battleship in New Jersey that shows up for this, right? There's the US Constitution Museum that shows up for this. But if I just want to see what people are typing in, I'm going to go into see all suggestions. And this is where it's going to start to build me a list of different phrases related to my original phrase.
When you do like see all suggestions, does that count as one of your 2 searches? Or does that count as an additional search?
No, it's the topic.
Okay.
The topic that you put into the search bar, they limit how many of them you can come up quickly. Yeah. And so here we can see we've got ship museum near me, ship museum San Diego. And then of course you can see a lot of people search by location: San Diego, Michigan, New York, NYC, in the US, right? So that tells us something right away. When people are looking for museums, a lot of times they're geo-targeting to something nearby, right? They want to be able to drive there, get there. So they're looking for near me or a specific city, specific region. You'll see there's a few things that are just like more specific. So like a Viking ship museum. I've actually been to one of those up in Rhode Island with my dad to see all the Viking stuff. Wooden ship museum. So now we've got some qualifiers around the types of ships that are being used. US Navy ship museums. Battleship museums, right? Aircraft carrier museums is related. So that's interesting. Now it's telling us, in addition to looking at ships, some of the people who like that stuff also like aircraft carriers and other parts of historical type things, right? You'll see Viking variations on the Viking topic are all pretty popular. We keep scrolling down, right? And so we're really seeing there's a few things I can tell right away. One is be specific about the ships that you actually show in the museum. Write more content about that. People actually don't just look for ships in general. They look for certain types of ships they want to see, right? We can also see that any content you can put on the website about where you're located is going to be valuable, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about local SEO, which would probably be really strong for a museum, that strategy, right? Because you actually want people to come to the museum potentially. And then we can see, like I said, that there's a few things that are military related, and that has its own real search value, right? The people who are interested in naval history and in the Navy in general, they're going to look specifically for that. So can you tell me a little bit about what is in the museum? Does any of that stuff resonate? Or
It's the last operational LST from World War II.
awesome. So yeah, so one of the things that I would also look for in here is whether or not there's any searches around World War II, right? That might be a sort of secondary place that we could research to say, here's what they look for ships, but what about people that are interested in World War II history, right? Because technically speaking, the museum fits into that conversation. So we could look at what people search in that way too. As we keep going down, you'll notice a lot of these, like the Navy thing, really strong. There's already been like 30 different ways that people search for that. So if there's things that are related to the Navy, that might be worth really expanding the content on that, because there's people who really want to dig into that particular piece of it. The other thing that I think is awesome here is looking at the different locations. Are you all connected to other museums in the country that focus on this? Yeah, so that's something where everybody who's got a ship museum of some kind, everybody should maybe think about interlinking strategies, right? How do your websites, because those museums that are in other places, they're not really direct competition to you, right? Because if somebody's in Florida, they're probably not necessarily going to be up here. But if there's a museum in Florida that does something similar, you all could be writing content, linking to each other, talking about each other, and that would actually build the authority of your own website, right? So sometimes even within an industry, this is where it's often funny that so my school that I run, JV Media Institute, which does the event that everybody came to in November, my business partner was one of my biggest competitors. So we were competitors for about 10 years. Then he said, I want to build an agency. It's going to compete with you, but I'd rather you actually help me build the agency. And then I want to start a school, and then I want you to be a lead instructor. I was like, sounds good to me, right? And everybody was like, why are you doing this? Like, don't, it's your competition, Sarah. What are you doing? I've made more money collaborating with my competitor than I ever did on my own. So all I have to say about that is there's almost 8 billion people on the planet, y'all. None of us are that original. Let it go. Collaborate with the people in your industry. Collaborate with people that share your audiences. Collaborate with people that have similar products and services when you can. Because when you work together as smaller businesses to link your websites, to talk to each other on social media, you're actually going to get better results overall. Right now, if there's somebody in your industry that you don't like, feel free to compete with them all day. Okay, so I'm not advocating for partnerships with people that don't align with your brand, but when you can align your brand with other people, like having museums in different areas, all in more connection to each other, interlinking and saying to people, hey, if you love the museum in Florida, you got to check out the one in Huntsville. Right? And the Huntsville Museum can say the same thing in the reverse. If you love what we've got going on here, you should see what they've got for naval stuff down in Georgia. Right? And just having those links between your websites over time, as you add more of those, it's going to get stronger.
Well, Sarah, wouldn't you recommend you do that? Would you do that on a secondary page? Or, I mean, would you necessarily do that on his homepage? You do it on a secondary page?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about content strategy, but it's wide open. I mean, it's wide open to what you want to do. It depends on how many partnerships you have and what it really looks like. Because I've had partner stuff go right on the homepage, because that's the strongest page we have. So if we link to you on our homepage, we're actually giving you a higher benefit than if we linked from an internal page, like a drop down. Right.
550 members, so I don't like to follow that.
No. And so like, that's a different thing because when you've got all of that, like I said, you might have to work out sections of the website where you're going to feature different people. So I would definitely take a look at romanticasheville.com just to see this in action because that website is massively optimized. Justin bought it. So my business partner bought a major tourism website in our city because he was friends with the guy who started it and ran it for 16 years. He wanted to retire. But you'll see in Romantic Asheville, they have whole sections of the website on different topics. Everything from small town, main streets, to hiking trails, to mountain biking, to weddings. I mean, like, it's literally endless.
So he could even have a different tab that says something about other great World War II history ships to see or something.
Yeah, and you'll see like he's got sections, and then in each section, he links to different partners, right? Through buttons, through images, through text. Yeah, and so like you could create a resources section that talks about all the other museums that you all are connected to. You could create one page and it's got a cool map with little dots on it that shows you where everything is. And then you've got a little bit of information about them laid out on the page. Again, if you start to have 50 of them, you want to make sure the page is usable. So we don't want some long scrolling insane list. We might have to design it so that you can click on something and it'll reveal everything in Georgia, or click on something and it reveals everything in North Carolina, in Alabama, right? So over time, as you build that partnership, you would actually want to expand how you're designing it.
I have a question with like usability and homepages. So some homepages, you just scroll on and on and on. So at what point is it good to have on the homepage? When does it become, how far down do people really scroll?
Yeah, so I mean, technically speaking, you can test that on your website. There's a great tool that I love to use called Hotjar that allows me to see heat mapping and click tracking on a website, because I think to look at the general data is not always helpful. It's really important to know what actually people do on your website. But I would say typically what we see in the market is no more than 20% of people ever end up past like 3 scrolls, right? The first 2 are the prime real estate on any page. All right, so that's why I tell people, don't put your call to action in the footer. You're killing me, because there's only like 10% of people who got all the way to the footer most of the time, right? And so those first 2 screens that fill on a scroll are probably the prime things. The 3rd and 4th screen, you'll probably see like somewhere, depending on the website, maybe somewhere between 30 to 50% will hit that 3rd or 4th screen, depending on how valuable the content is. But once we're past like 2, 3 scrolls, it's like anything further down below that, we can really assume it's going to be, if we're getting 20% down there, we're doing good. A lot of people are getting 6, right? And so that's where, you know, you can, from a technical standpoint, you can make it as long as you want, and they can scroll forever. Infinite scroll is actually a thing, right? That's what Instagram does, right? I just keep scrolling and it keeps loading. But I think at the end of the day, what we find is that's actually not healthy for people. And so that's where I'm really looking at how can we have 3 main calls to action on a new page. If we've got more than that, we're hitting a laundry list and we're probably losing people because there's too many options. So I really want to think about 3 main things on the homepage that I want them to do to go to the next step. And those have to be pretty clearly, in my opinion, towards the top. Whatever's at the bottom, I think we just want to realize it's probably not going to get as much attention. So it can't be anything that's high priority, right? But let's say you want to have your blog posts at the bottom of your homepage. I always thought it was no big deal if it's down there. Some people make it down, they might click on it, right? You're not necessarily prioritizing that content though by putting it that far down on the page, if that makes sense. Yeah. So let's take a look at just another more specific search, because I liked the idea. Oh, the other thing I just want to throw out is once you do this research, just scroll down here. So this is giving me 1,000 different ways that people search for ship museums or something that Google believes is related. So it's endless. One thing I love is I can organize this by monthly volume. So I can actually click that column and it's going to show me the top, most popular, most general terms. And then it's going to scroll me through all the way down to more and more specific things, right? So like it's instantly like the word maritime. That's a good phrase to add in, right? If you're not using that. Things like naval, maritime, those are all variations on the ship topic, right? So that just now is expanding my ability to understand what are people looking for when they look for what we actually have to offer. The other thing is, once I'm done with this research, I can export a spreadsheet. So I actually just can save this as like an Excel spreadsheet. It's a CSV, but it'll open in Excel. And then I can actually pull up that spreadsheet. I can delete anything I don't like. And I can keep all the things that I think are worth having. So I can refer back to them later as I'm thinking about how to create content. The other thing too is I can filter things. So let's say there's a phrase in here. Let me see if I can find something. All right, so there's a lot about this USS Constitution. I'm assuming that's not in your museum. So if I put in the word Constitution, I can exclude it, right? So you'll see here, I've got this little advanced filter, right? What that's going to do is then remove those phrases out of the list for me. So I can declutter the list if I want. Do you have a question? Yeah, so we're going to talk about local SEO. I mean, you can't. You're not going to go stuffing ship museum near me into your website. That's actually not useful because that's really going to be guided by them being on the phone. Most people who search that are almost like 99% on their mobile device, so maybe that search. Some people are on their desktop, but it's a really small number. So most of the time, that's about your local listings and how well you show up in those local listings, which we'll talk about. Right. So yeah, so that keyword phrase is not something you're going to try to put into your website. Like you're not going to find a page and make the title of it "Ship Museum Near Me," right? Because it's really sort of, again, that's Google's going to look at that and be like, this is a trick, and we don't like tricks, right? Like that's something that's controlled by the geo-targeting on your phone or your computer. So even if I searched right now for ship museums, it would probably pull you all first because you're local, even on my computer, right? So anytime I'm looking for brick and mortar, Google's going to assume I want the closest thing in my physical proximity. And it doesn't actually matter which device I'm on. But on my phone, it's really going to hyper sort of geo-target me. And so what was the phrase you wanted to look at? Because it was more branded.
Like Huntsville.
Can you spell?
Huntsville.
All right, great. So that's like a branded phrase, right?
Well, it's, I mean, what is the link? I guess you could-
Oh, there we
link,
go.
it's smart.
No problem. Let's see if it'll pull it up for me. And again, a lot of these fields are going to be defaulted just to include a mix of things. Interesting. So we're going to scroll down to where Guntersville is. So we've got Lake Guntersville State Park is coming up. Lake Guntersville up here. Guntersville State Park, Guntersville, Alabama. It's funny, it's throwing in at the top things that are related to lakes because, you know, the searches are, it's so broad. So it's trying to like hyperfocus. So it's like you'll see things like pontoon rentals, right? Can you rent pontoons there?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So this is how smart Google is, right? It knows. So it's like, okay, we're talking about the lake, but people probably aren't just looking for the lake in general. They're going to want to do things. So it's immediately trying to pull like other things that are related. There's other state park names that it's pulling in as well. It's interesting. It's pulling in like searches for maps, searches for bed and breakfasts, right? So it's like just telling us a little bit again about what Google associates with this topic. I haven't seen fishing yet, but I'm not too far down the list yet. There's a lot of weather things coming up, which I find interesting, that people are checking the weather when they're coming to the lake, right? So that's just, I love that kind of stuff because then I'm like, ooh, on the lake pages, maybe we need a widget that tells you what the weather is, right? So that like when you hit that page, you literally know it's going to be sunny today, right? That's something where you could easily add like a simple thing that displays that type of stuff. Yeah, camping in Alabama came up, a little bit of golf searches. There is a lot of stuff around Guntersville, just like restaurants, the area in general. do you know of a place called Honeycomb Campground? All right, so I'm going to tell you right now, great partner potential. There's already synergy there. So do they have a great website? Is there a way to talk to them? Is there a way to link back, right?
They just have Facebook.
Mhm.
Pretty sure.
So that's just something to think about.
Like water level. I'm like, a lot of things.
So one other thing I'll say about Honeycomb is if their person doesn't have a website, right? A company that doesn't have a website yet, there's nothing wrong with conventionally talking to them, building an entire page on your website about that, right? Because then your website might show up for people looking for the campground. You could link them to the Facebook.
We have, each campground listed within our website and hotels and stuff, so.
Yeah. But if you want to create more content, think about the storytelling aspect, right? Like listings are one thing, but you can add all sorts of other content that's more of telling the story of the places and like giving you additional reasons to link back and build out something that would actually show up in search. Because if they don't have a website, probably what's showing up in search most of the time is their Facebook and that's it, right? So there's an opportunity to pull people into your website and then redirect them to the campground itself, right? And actually make their listing do better potentially in some ways.
So it is worthwhile to link to someone's social media.
I mean, if that's all they have, yeah. Because when people, so let's say somebody's searching for that, you had a great page that tells the story of Honeycomb Campground. People start searching for it on Google and that page starts to show up. When people hit that page, what you don't want to do is then be like, here's about Honeycomb Campground, but we're not going to tell you how to contact them. We're not going to take, right? Like that would be a bad user experience. So if we think about the customer journey, it's like, cool, if we wanted to capitalize off a partnership with them so that we get more website traffic and maybe have people that found that page and interacted with it more, it's like then we could send them to the listing, we could send them to the Facebook, and that way, because we have to assume the intent of the person is to find Honeycomb, right? Because they search for the name. So they're not just searching for camping. They're searching for a specific campground. So we want to make sure we send them right there. Yeah, that next step.
Is there a specific way you track those people that click that link to their Facebook page?
You have to code that on your own website. It's called an event. So you have to have a website where somebody who you're working with knows how to tag a button so that every time that button is clicked, it shows in your data, right? The only other option potentially is for them to be looking at their own Facebook insights and to be able to tell where people are coming from. And unless they're pretty savvy about using that section, they might not understand that they can see that. And then Facebook doesn't always tell you exactly which website it came from. Sometimes it'll just say third-party website. So I know that they originated from a website and ended up on Facebook, but it doesn't give me the URL every time because of privacy and security. And so, yeah, so the best way is actually, if you want to track clicks, is like I said, to really have, we're going to talk about this afternoon, but tagging and what we call UTM parameters, so that when somebody clicks a button, it actually tracks right in your data to show you how many times they clicked that button. And that's, we call those basically conversions to a certain extent, especially when you have a listing website. So if somebody looks at a listing, they click on the website link, basically, that's what we call an event, right? And so a lot of times if we have a lot of listings, what we want to do is set it up so that every single time somebody clicks those buttons to leave the site, we're actually tracking it. Because that's going to allow us to say to the people listed, you got 27 clicks last month, right?
That's something me and my boss talked about going to like our hotels and our restaurants saying, hey, we gave you X amount of people.
Yeah. And so as we keep going, you'll see there's lots of other brands in here, the Hampton Inn, it's just interesting information in my mind. It's like thinking, okay, so what is already being associated with the lake? It's not just camping and different things like that. It's also like specific brands that are being sort of searched in tandem with this kind of stuff. As we keep going down, we'll see other things like best lakes in Alabama, right? That's a broader topic potentially that opens up a similar thing to the museums, which is like, how could we potentially, if there's other lake areas that have great websites, how could we all be interlinking more, talking about each other more? Like I said, lots of restaurants, cabin rentals, bed and breakfast. Now we're getting into the fishing stuff, fishing reports, right, is in here. And again, we've got up to 1,000. So if I keep clicking through these, what you'll see is the search volume is lower, right, as we go down the list. And these are usually per month searches in the US.
What are the blue dots, the circle?
Yeah, so the blue dots, that column is called relevancy. And what it's basically judging is like a sort of relationship between the topics, because we're going to see so many broader topics here. So like we searched basically Lake Guntersville. So when we look at something like Guntersville Lake Fishing Guide, see how it's got a 5-dot relevancy? Well, yeah, because that's a fishing guide specifically for the lake that we're talking about, right? But if we look at some of the other ones like State Park, that gets slightly less relevant because the state park is actually much broader than just a lake, right? And so when we see things that are going to have like 2 dots or 3 dots, right? We're going to see that these, like Lake Guntersville bass fishing, that relevancy is a little bit lower. And so that, I'd have to know how much bass is in the lake and I'd like to judge why they're giving it that. But yeah, they're just saying this topic is super relevant to the original topic or less relevant. And I always go after the things that are more relevant.
As far as people searching for bass or something else, I guess, that's where the relevancy.
The relevancy is part of the Moz tool. So any SEO tool that you use, they have their own proprietary software that's making decisions about things, right? And so there'd be just like ranking factors. There's a bunch of factors that they use to say this is more relevant or less relevant. But on a basic level, yes, you are correct. It does have to do with search volume. It has to do with what people are clicking on, how many people search for this and that, that sort of stuff. So there's a lot that goes into it, but you are correct that it does have a behavioral level to it, for sure.
Is there an easy way to, so like Honeycomb Campground is an example, to see if they had a page that had a link back to like Guntersville or to the CBD Explore Guntersville page?
So we'll talk about that with the Search Console. Okay. You can see all of the links that point to your website.
So you know if they already had something linking back to your page.
Well, so there's 2 ways to look at it. There's the Search Console, which shows you every website that links back to you, whether people clicked on it or not. And then in Google Analytics, you would just go to referral sites. And anybody who's clicked a link and come to your site, you will literally see the website that it came from. So you have to dig in and find it in your own data, right?
But they may have added us without us even requesting
Absolutely.
that partnership.
Yeah.
But we already know that before we contact them. Okay.
Yeah. If you actually look at your referral sites, you're going to see exactly basically what websites are sending you traffic. And I would look at like the whole year, right? Because some months they might send people and some months they might not. And it'll show you the exact page that they came from as well when you look at it from there. So yeah, so you can look at referral sites and even come up with partnership ideas, right? You'll be like, oh, we didn't know we have a link on this website. You'll also find crazy websites where you're like, why do these people link to us? And I have no answer for that question, right? Some links are weird. Any other questions about keyword research? Like I said, with keyword research, what I want you to think about is having fun, right? Which is having a good time and just playing around with this and using it to generate content ideas, not thinking of it as like, we got to stuff keywords places, but what are things that we've never put on the website before that people are searching for, right? So that's why I said, how often are you using the phrases naval versus maritime versus ship versus, right? Because if you're not diversifying the terminologies, you might be showing up more for one type of terminology and less for another, but they're all relevant to what you do, right? So this is where we're mining for these opportunities in this process. We're not at the point where we're going to do the architecture yet. We're just trying to get an idea of what do we have on the site that we know people are looking for and what have we not put on the site, but we now realize people are looking for it, right? And what are the opportunities, like I said, to potentially create more links between our website and other websites. So I want to take a break just so we can clear our heads because we're going to get more technical in the next round. But it's 10:47. Let's come back here at about 5 of. There's coffee and water and snacks. But at 10:55, we'll come back here and we will jump into actually doing content. And if anybody has questions, let me know. Y'all have a blog on your website?
Highlight some of those things that we're looking at.
Yeah, and I don't think we have enough people, especially a lot of sites that have listings. To the point, right? You have to be fair with the listings. You have, you know what I'm saying? You can't have a bunch of people getting on that. Because somebody's getting more attention than somebody else. But that's right, like blogging is great. It creates an area of the website where you need to generate content regularly. And if you look at the keyword research, sometimes I like I said, I'll have like 2 years of blogging. You know, but we're just doing roundups of different things, right? We're just really talking about, we don't know the lake, there's life in the lake that encompasses a bunch of things. So having some blogs around fishing, having some blogs around that talk about, you know, camping or talk about, you know, and just like build that out over time. So I just feel like with that, you know, that creates more opportunities to invite people to be a part of it, and then one responds, gets the attention. Like I've done that a lot in tourism, where I'm like, look, we're gonna throw this opportunity to everybody. But you got like 1 month to get on board. And if you don't, then other people got the attention. You just you gotta say yes to things and you want it. But the blog, I think, just is a natural place. I had a still well. Yeah.
Making sure it's like.
Oh, yeah, no, I have a strong. I mean, you can start bringing it in then. I will still be teaching the last 30 minutes. It's not gonna bother me. So truly, like, if you want to start doing it, that's it. Yeah.
Oh, so there's the.
I mean, it's fine with me, seriously.
We'll go look.
I'm all for it. I can teach what we do with you, trust me. But yeah, I feel like, you know, a lot of times blogging too, it's very random. And I kind of like using keyword research to be a little more focus on what people are searching for. Because I can see like it's camping more popular than fishing, more popular than something else.
It's interesting, I can't get more than fishing. This is what I do back stuff. All this is like fishing thousands a year.
There might be that might be an aspect of the pandemic, right? Because the searching for being outside massively shifted. I work a lot in the outdoor industry, so I'm something big shift, and it's kind of exciting. It shifted because people didn't want to be inside. But now the people showing it's like it's not going away. So people that shifted and spending more time outdoors actually like it. So like they're doing a lot more of it. Like camping searches like increased by like 400% or something. You know, so that might be why we're seeing that slide level. Because that's a lot of
Fishing so specific.
but you know what, though, fishing people are like motorcycle people. They're serious. They're good niche audience. They're good niche audience because they are. I worked with a fishing guy. He was based on Topsail Island. And his website, when I was at like how quickly he was putting his job for the winter. And he wanted to do fishing times. And it was like within a year, he was done his job and that's out for like and I was like, this is really people like fish. And they really search for specific things. You know, so that audience is one you can always like keep to massage with. So,
My home computer.
yeah. So like, I mean, Like, you know, testing how long you want something to.
I mean, just where it comes up and say it'll come up differently here.
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you some training tools today that you can use for that. Yeah.
So we eliminate.
Yeah.
So we get like getting-
Well, even if you're in the history, it's not gonna be different. I mean, it's even using like a window, you're still on your computer. so
Right,
you
well,
can
that,
get
that's
search.
it.
Yeah, so you have to have SEO jobs and track stuff. It's not you searching. Yeah, the Google Search Console is the number one tool. It's free. Yeah, and so it's like companion tool to analytics. It'll show you all of the Google rankings and how many people are there. Luckily, the Search Console is a little easier because it's very specifically about the Google results. And it's also a security tool, so it'll protect you. Yes, exactly. So yeah, we're gonna look at that at the end of this. We have Google Search Console. If you had something set up analytics, they're really easy to add. It's like one of those things that have a copy.
So,
Yeah, we'll talk about that. There's some big changes. and stuff, so, yeah, we'll talk about that. 'Cause, yeah, you should still be trying to do that. But we are getting ready to launch a new version next year. Yeah. But if you have it, let's take it more now. Oh, thanks. I'm so glad. It's one of my favorite topics. Yeah, I feel like SEO is one of those topics where it's a hard thing to read about, it's a hard thing to kind of learn on your own. And like, it's actually not, some of it's not as complicated as we think it is, and it's changed so much. Other parts of it, it's like, here's what you don't have to do if you're reading about it. Like, I want people to be able to walk away like, this is stuff I need to pay attention to. This stuff I need to like. I'm always working every month, better and better to get that stuff in the spot. Yeah.
6 hours.
Yes, and no. Like technical people are smarter on one level.
Yeah. Well, this one, these were you're built in spray. He just tells me, oh, so, okay.
It's not right. But I mean, as far as. Contact for 15. Our website, maybe this is a description of where it's So that would be a bit hard.
All right, so we're gonna jump back in, y'all, so we can stay on time and have lunch on time. There's a couple final things I just want to say about keyword research. This is one of my other favorite tools. This is called Answer the Public. It's also in those links. And this tool actually comes out of, I believe they're based in England. But what I love about this tool, they're not going to give you search volume like what we saw, with the actual number of searches per month. But this is more of a conversational tool. So we were just talking about social media and email marketing, some other things that I think keyword research is really valuable for, because again, keyword research is just understanding what people are kind of looking for out there. So if I'm creating social media content, I'm writing blogs, I'm sending emails out every month. Once I do my keyword research, it's really giving me a broader perspective on what topics we could maybe talk about that are going to get people excited. So as we scroll down here, what I love, so I put in Ship Museum just as an example. First thing it does is show me some questions people have typed in. And so we see things like, is the Maritime Museum free, right? Is there a Titanic ship museum, right? There's these very specific questions people are asking. When we get down here, it goes into prepositions. So this is things like, we've got locations in here, especially. So it's like, near, can, to, with. So it's like the phrasings that we're using. We keep going down. We got comparison phrases, right? So again, we've got like, versus, and then we get down into just an alphabetical list of all the topics related to Ship Museum. And so again, we're seeing some of the same trends here. A lot of people search by their location, right? That a lot of people, again, there's a little bit of questions around the types of ships and things like that. And all of this allows me also to, if I scroll up, I have a spreadsheet button right there. So again, just another sort of way of looking at it. Again, for social media and things like that, I love this tool because it's got a more conversational flavor. Right? Because we didn't know, people don't just type 1 or 2 words into Google. They ask Google like 8-word questions, right? So that's why we want to get more specific, not broad, when it comes to understanding our keyword research. And so when you're in the slide deck looking at this, you'll see I put in just some quick research tips. The one thing I want to talk about is what we call the long tail. in SEO. This has actually been something we've talked about for the last 20 years, called the long tail keywords. That just means keyword phrases that are more specific. They address very specific topics, problems, questions, and things like that. So again, when you're writing content, what you're going to find when you do keyword research is the broader the phrase is, the more competitive the phrase is. And the longer and more detailed the phrase is, potentially the less competitive it is, right? So that's where diversifying your website to have more specific answers to questions, to address, specific things in your blog articles can be really, really valuable, because that your whole website might not be able to compete for a broader term, but you might have a blog post about a very specific question related to what you do, and that could start generating tons of traffic because nobody else has answered that question before so specifically. So I'm always looking for those opportunities, right? Again, to create content that's going to be super purposeful. The other thing you'll find is, again, thinking about intent, informational, investigative versus transactional, that phrases actually fall into those buckets. So when people are ready to buy things, they ask the questions differently, or they search for things a little differently than when they are just trying to get as much information as they can. So you'll start to see that in the research. Some things are very sort of actionable search phrases, right? Like, I want to do this right now. I want to buy this right now. And some of them are going to be like, I'm planning a trip and I'm wondering about all this. Or I have to go shopping and I'm interested in what the opportunities are in my area, right? So again, this is just, I think, a quick list of things to think about when you're brainstorming and doing research on your own. And also, like, really think about regional stuff. Some of us can sell to anyone, anywhere, and some of us are hyper local, and we need people to actually show up at our physical location, right? And again, that's going to affect kind of how we choose our keyword terminologies. And like I said, the long tail, to me, one thing I want to say about this that most of my students struggle with is that they feel like it's limiting them, right? The more specific we get, they're like, well, what about the other people, right? So we're talking about the lake. It's like there's a really strong niche market of the fishing people. And we're talking about how people who love to fish, man, they're serious. I consider them very much like motorcycle people. They love it. They're super into it, right? And so when you have a small group like that, creating content for them that's really going to attract them and get them engaged and get them excited. If you can do that with that one segment of people, your website's going to start doing better. And then you can move on to the next segment and the next segment, right? So we always want to sort of use the things that are the low-hanging fruit, the places that we always have, we already have traction, that we're already doing well, and we want to amplify that engagement in different ways, because that's going to help us attract a new market, right, of people that maybe want to do something else. Right. And so this is where in the digital world, I always say, a lot of times we're so focused on the new eyes, the new visitors, the new people who haven't given us money yet, that we forget how much attention we actually needed to pay to the people that already supported us, that have already been to our location, bought our products, bought our services. And when you're doing great digital marketing, the truth is, and this is true of social media, search engine optimization, email marketing, if you can't engage the people that already know your business name or already know your brand, then most of these algorithms are not going to show you new people, right? So if the people who already bought a product or already hired you for something or already came to your location don't care, you're not proving to the algorithms that people who don't know about you yet will care. So this is where I often advocate that customer service and marketing are actually the same thing, and they should no longer be discussed separately, right? Because every amount of customer service that I do to engage the people that already support our business, those people are my gateway into people who haven't heard about me yet, right? It's how the social media algorithms work. It's how we're going to see email performance go up. It's how we're going to see search engine optimization kind of increase your authority, is through that relationship. So the people who are already on your website, you want them to stay longer. You want them to look at more. You want them to have a reason to come back because they were fishing last year and now they're ready for the new season, right? We want to go ahead and do that because as we engage those people, we're actually giving ourselves more opportunities to be seen by new people who don't know about it, right? So that's why I'm always like, don't get so caught up in the new thing, right? It's easy to get caught up in the shiny new people with their wallets, but they're only part of the package when it comes to how the digital world really works. So there's two sections we're going to talk about as we're wrapping up this last hour. And I am going to warn you all, this is like rapid fire. We're going to digest a bunch of information. So take a deep breath, right? Let your brain just receive, be like, I can do it. I'm super smart. Because I really believe this is going to sound like some technical stuff in a lot of detail, but the truth is it's very intuitive. It's relationships. That's what we're talking about, right? Even though we're talking about SEO strategy, we're really just talking about connections and relationships. So be open to that. Because like I said, really the reason we create content is so that we can have a deeper connection to people online. So on page and off page, these are just buzzwords that you would hear if you were reading about SEO. On page means I'm working on my website to make my website better. Off page means I'm doing all sorts of other stuff on the internet to complement my website, right? And like we talked about, they both have value when it comes to gaining more authority, expertise, and trustworthiness. I'm sure you've heard the phrase over the years, content is king. That was a big thing, I think, all through the early 2000s into the, like 2010, 2012. Around 2011, 2012, Google started making really big changes. And, I still think content matters, but I think what happened was we went into a world where we all just churn out content for the sake of doing it, which in my mind is called cluttering the internet. And I'm always like, hashtag make the internet a better place. Please make quality versus quantity. We don't need any more garbage floating around the internet any more than we need it floating around in the world. And humans, we are unbelievably talented at cluttering up every single thing that we do. And so I feel like as business owners and brands, people that are promoting things, we really want to think about the value and quality of what we're doing, not just the amount of the content. And a lot of people would say, once we got to content is king, I was like, well, then really conversion is queen, right? Conversion is when somebody becomes more than just an eyeball. They actually sign up for something. They actually buy a ticket to something. They actually purchase a product. They actually drive to your location. That's when they have converted into something that's beyond just a visitor on your website or a follower on your Instagram, right? It's great to have followers and visitors, but if they never actually take a deeper action, then what did it really mean? Right? It didn't increase your bottom line. It didn't grow the business at all, right? It got more brand recognition, name recognition, which is awesome. But once we get that brand and name recognition, we actually need people to do something with that information, which is like, give us money at the end of the day, right? Or become a part of something. Even if you're a nonprofit, you might have people that are volunteering or showing up for free events. Those things are still conversions on some level. And I would say, where we've evolved to now, in my opinion, is that conversation is actually what matters. So engagement is important on every channel. Engagement in your email marketing, engagement in your advertising, engagement in your social media, engagement on your website. All of those things are really, really important. And that engagement is literally sort of that back and forth conversation, relationship building. And then eventually what we hope is that action or conversion that people take because of that, right? So that's where, like I said, with SEO, I like us to get away from the keywords and all that sort of ideas that we're going to try to figure out a way to get to the top and really just think about how are we creating websites that are more fun to be on, where people actually have something to do, right? And give them a reason to keep coming back, right? That's why a lot of us blog. Right, is we want a part of the website that's getting updated that gives people a reason to think of us as a resource and return to our website. The number one thing I think people should do if they want to better optimize their website is to start by just looking at your own pages. And before we wrap up, I'm going to hop on the Google Search Console. But the Google Search Console is an SEO tool. It's free. It's from Google. It's a companion to Google Analytics. And it is the #1 tool that I use to see how websites are doing on Google. And I suggest everybody have it. It's super brilliant. So when I show it to you today, it's a really exciting thing. It's a little simpler than Google Analytics, which we're going to talk about all afternoon. But it'll really help you kind of see which pages of your website are already getting traction. Like I said, if I have a page on my website that's on, it's number 25 on page 3, I could maybe get that page to page 1 in some circumstances, right? If I optimized it better, if I got more links to it. So always start with the existing pages. You can create new content, and a lot of times keyword research will give you a ton of ideas for new content. But when you create new content, it's like having a new baby, right? It's like born into the world of Google and then it has to grow up. And it takes a long time to grow up and have Google actually care about that page and put it into the results, right? When you build a new website, Google often takes up to 90 days to even index it, right? So the Google Search Console is actually a way to invite Google, tell Google that your website is ready and you want it to be indexed, and I'll show you how to do that.
Does that matter? Like we're relaunching our website this summer, but we're keeping the same URL.
So keeping all the URLs the same is key. That will help you maintain most of your authority. What you would probably see is that some pages that have done well, if you removed a lot of content or radically changed, like more than 30% of it, it might reacclimate into how it's showing up, right? But the key thing is to keep the URLs the same. Yeah, and anything that you deleted, redirect. It's called a 301 redirect. So if there were pages that were deleted from the website, you need to have your developer 301 redirect those old URLs to new ones that are relevant, so you don't just lose that authority entirely. Yeah, so I will say, just on a technical end, never change your domain. I'm serious. It better be an emergency or you sold a business or something. To never change your domain. It kills all of your Google authority instantly, right? So when you're rebuilding a website, you want to keep the domain the same, and if you can, you want to keep all the URLs pretty much the same, because the authority is attached to the link to the page. All right, don't delete content willy-nilly. We'll talk about that in analytics, but really never delete content without making sure that it's not showing up on Google. Because what you do is turn off a faucet. So you'll have a page, it's getting like 200 visitors a month from Google. You delete that page, you just lost 200 people. Okay.
So a few years ago, they changed our website to a new URL, but the old one is still there. Can the developers do a parallel direct to the old URL to our new URL?
Yes, I mean, technically speaking, how long ago was it?
At least 3 years ago.
I mean, it's not gonna matter now. You already lost all the authority. You're probably building it back already. Yeah.
So we can just delete that old URL. It's still out there.
Yeah, it depends on the setup. Is it just like one page or like what's going on? Oh yeah, you gotta get rid of that. Yeah, stat. Yeah, if there's an old website that's got mimicking content, they needed to take that down the day you launched the new one, 100%. And actually, if that whole website is still up, I would talk to them about whether or not you can 301 redirect every page of that website to the new one. Yeah, it's gonna be some work. Yeah, so one of the things Google hates is duplicated content, which means when it sees the same content on two websites, it penalizes you, right? You're not supposed to do that. Yeah. Yeah, so you want to make sure the old website is completely gone away. And if they can, since it's still up, 301 redirect all those to the new website. And then that'll hopefully transfer any leftover authority on the old website over to your new one. Yeah.
Well, okay, when you just said that just made me think, okay, so like when we get a new member, sometimes they don't know how to go in and create their own content on the page. So we'll go to their website, copy their content, and bring it over to our page. Is that hurting our site because we're copying the content?
How much content are we talking? One paragraph, two paragraphs?
One or two paragraphs.
One or two paragraphs is probably okay. If you could edit it a little bit so it's not a carbon copy, would be helpful. Yeah.
A few words.
Yeah, but because it's a listing, which means you've probably got one or two paragraphs that are identical to the website and there's a link to their website, right? So Google is smart enough to understand, okay, this is just a listing leading people, right? So it's probably not penalizing everything. But if you started to add longer content, what you don't want to do is have like 2 pages with identical text. Because to Google, that's what we call duplicated content. And there's too many questions about plagiarism and things like that, which is why they flag that type of stuff.
Even within your own website, example, we have the state parks. The state parks are an attraction. they're a marina, they're a campground, they're a wedding venue, they're a golf course. So we have a lot of the same content about Lake Guntersville State Park in like 5 different places within our website. So are you saying we need to go in and make
So do
sure
you
that the
like copy and
content's different?
paste the exact same text and put it on like 5
Sometimes,
pages?
yeah, so we need to go in and change that to be more specific.
So no, there's actually something, and it's actually at the end of this presentation. It's highly technical, but it's called canonical URLs. What you need to do is figure out which one of those pages is doing the best on Google that has that same content. And then you can actually put into your code something that says, hey, Google, this is the most important URL with this content. And so if we're going to give something authority, we give it to this page, right? And then that explains to Google why you've got repetitive content in multiple places.
Okay.
So I don't know how the website's built. There's usually plugins or extensions you can use to identify canonical URLs, but that's the way that product-based systems do it and listing-based systems do it, right? Is because if I have a product company and I have an online store, I might have a product description title that's showing up on all these different pages in different places. And I can say to Google, this is the #1 top page. It's the canonical page. And so we want you to focus on that, and all the other similar pages, they're okay.
So would it benefit like the state park to go into their listing and tailor the wedding page to the wedding, to what they offer for weddings, and to tailor
Absolutely.
the golf course to what they offer for golf?
Absolutely, because that's what people want, right? If I'm clicking on weddings, I go to the state park and some general thing about the state park, how does that happen? Now I got to figure out what they do for weddings, right? So yeah, so if we're thinking about the customer journey, absolutely. And Google will reward you for that because it's more usable.
I'll explain it.
I mean, we do have wedding pages. We do have specific pages.
Yeah, so that's what we need to do, is make sure those.
Yeah, what she's talking about is that they're linking to the more specific things and not just like one general overview.
Well, that's what we need to make sure we do.
Yeah, 'cause that'll benefit y'all.
We started out with just, we picked just like, whatever, like, URL. And then that's the URL we use for everything. But we really need to be linking the wedding page to the wedding page, golf to the golf page.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, because basically what you're going to do is increase the relevancy of that interlinking strategy. And so that benefits the people on your website because it's actually going to take them to places that they really need with the clear information about what they're looking for. Like I said, weddings, golf, fishing, whatever. But then it also does them a huge favor because now you've made all the interlinking strategy more specific and you're not just linking to one page of their website, you're linking to multiple pages of their
And
website.
the
So that
same
benefits both of you.
would go from Leah's writing a blog, we need to make sure that if we're talking about camping, we're looking to their camping page and not to their main website.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I usually our
Link.
listing for that, what I'm talking about. So
Mhm. Yeah,
so
and
just
there's.
put it back on me, I see it.
I think I my thoughts to stay at home and work on everybody's pages.
But so again, when we're talking about content strategy, one thing you'll see a lot of conversation about is website architecture. So remember I said how pages need to be scannable, right? You need somebody in just a couple seconds to be able to scan the page and be like, this is what it's about. And then usually they'll pick whatever paragraph they want to read and read more. And then if they get what they need, they'll keep reading, right? So it's like we have to kind of hook them in to the reading. Inside of every page of your website, when you're editing it, there's different things that you can use to create that layout. A lot of times you'll see what we call headings. Heading 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is usually in there if you're editing your own website. So headings are a great place when you can to have keyword phrases because Google recognizes them first. And they actually recognize H1s, H2s, and H3s as more important than the rest of the text on the page, right? So a lot of times your page title, you want it to be an H1. And then you might have a subheader below that, you want that to be an H2. Then you might have multiple subheaders below that, you want those to be H3s. That's Google standard. That's actually been their standard for the whole time I've had my job in SEO. And so their bots understand that, and the more keywords that can be in those headers and really clearly state the purpose of the page, the more you're going to see that page does better, right? There's a bunch of other areas that you can also kind of enhance on any page that exists. Again, if I'm doing blogs, this is the blog title, right? And when I'm writing out that article, I want to make sure it's scannable with more headings. I want to make sure that there's links to other places like we just talked about. So especially if I'm writing a blog or I'm writing a page on my website, have so like at least 2 or 3 links that take people to the next step. If they're reading this, what do you want them to read next, right? It can be just text links or it can be buttons. You know, it's really flexible on how you're laying it out. Everybody's website's a little different. And then for photos, whenever you upload a photo, there's something called an alt tag. It's called an alternate tag. It allows you to describe the photo in text. And this is where you want to be aware of it. This is for the American Disabilities Act. If I'm using a screen reader and I can't see the photo, it will read to me the description of the photo. So I have context for what's on the page, right? So a lot of times people will say, well, put your keywords in the alt tags. No, put your keywords in the alt tags if the photo is actually a keyword, right? So I live in Asheville. I remember working with an accountant and I was like, we don't put up pictures of the mountains and then put the alt tag, Asheville accountant. This is not an accountant, it's a picture of the Blue Ridge. And he was like, yeah, but they told me to stuff those in there. I'm like, you're just giving people who can't see a really horrible experience, right? So back in the day, people used to say, put 50 keyword phrases in your alt tag. So then some poor person using their screen reader got to the page of your website and it read them 50 random phrases that make no sense to the page, right? So we really want to be aware.
I'm more terrified, it's like we have thousands of photos that don't even have a title, much
Yeah.
less a description.
Yeah, and again, in an alt tag, right? So keep that in mind, because sometimes you'll have a photo title and stuff like that that have to do with captioning, but the alt tag should literally be called that, right? It is for the ADA, it was created for that, and it is a way to contextualize something when people can't see it. And so you don't want to stuff keywords there. If it's a picture of butterflies on a log, you just alt tag it, butterflies on a log, right? But if you're product-based or you're location-based, it can say downtown Huntsville, right? And that phrase is probably going to be worthwhile to have, right, in the photo. It's going to, again, enhance the purpose of the page. Same thing with videos, titles and descriptions on videos. So when I put a video on YouTube, that title and description, if I can have keywords in it, really valuable, right? That's going to enhance, if I put that YouTube video on the page, the understanding of the page at large, if it's related, right? And again, you don't want to stuff a keyword if the video is not about something keyword related, but it's a good way to think about creating more video content going forward that would match up with the purpose of your pages. How many of you are blogging? I know I've talked to at least like 3 or 4 people. Awesome. So blogging is my favorite. Talk about long tail all day long. Can we write very specific things in a blog? So I really encourage you to use that keyword research to come up with your blog ideas for the year, even sometimes. I love to come up with keyword themes for each month. So then we're talking about that theme on social media, we're sending it out in our email, and we're writing blogs about it. And then what I'm doing in my ecosystem is I'm making a keyword theme every month. Maybe I want that keyword theme to go on for 3 months. That's fine too, because there might be a bunch of variations and synonyms in the way that I talk about it that I could be using to enhance both the website messaging and all of our other channels. The messaging is like supporting that cohesively. So I do a lot of keyword research, then mapping out content topics for a year or 2 years, and then really putting together a spreadsheet where each month I've got like a bunch of phrases that I want us to have in mind when we're creating that content.
But AI smart enough to know if people are staying with your newsletters or dropping newsletters, if they're unsubscribing, does the AI know that?
No, that's really coming through your own email system. So like MailChimp is tracking that. I do think Google is aware of like when people are clicking back and forth though between your newsletter and your website. So that is activity because they see anytime somebody comes to the website, Google's paying attention. Where they came from, how long they stayed, how many pages they looked at, right? To understand the engagement of the person on the site. So that part of it matters, but they're not necessarily seeing like your MailChimp stats, which is like your open rates, right? Yeah, they're not necessarily good. They can't spy on that because that's your private account. Yeah.
Multiple people, it's always right. Is there anything wrong with their blog, their page? Go back to them. That's what, let's feel like some ladies. Page the blog.
Yeah, so
Stealing their content.
yeah, so let me clarify. So are we talking about people on their own websites and blogs writing content about you all and then linking back? Or are we talking about your website featuring guest bloggers? So it's guest bloggers.
My website featuring guest bloggers.
Yeah, so when you have a guest blogger, a lot of times you will want to link over to them, but you're doing them a favor. They're, from a linking perspective, they're doing you a favor by writing the content, then you're doing them a favor by linking from your website to theirs. But that outward link, it doesn't affect your authority, right? You can have a million links going other places. That's not gonna affect. Backlinks that point at you are what matter. Does that make sense? Because like, so think about it like this. So I have a website for my school. I work at a bunch of different organizations where I teach classes for them like this, right? All those organizations can put up a page about my class and then link back to my website. When they do that, they give my school credibility, right? That doesn't really, it doesn't really matter in some ways. Like they're not getting credibility by linking to me. I'm getting the credibility. See what I'm saying? So that's where backlinks improve credibility and authority. You linking out to people is giving them authority and credibility, right? So that's really what a lot of times guest blogging is the trade-off of. We created original content for your website. So that helps you build up more content. And you link back to my blog or website as the author, and that gives me some credibility and authority, especially because you're a state park website, which is going to have natural authority above other types of websites.
Page. Blog. Blog page. Call that creator.
No. It's automatically a favor anytime that you link over to their website and give them credit as the author of the content.
But don't do that with pictures.
Probably tell.
Mhm.
Don't do that with pictures. Yeah, I was like. That's right.
Yes, yeah, there's nobody can tell you you're not allowed to link to them. Anybody can link to anybody, right? Yeah, that's just like the free internet. Like I can put a link to any website that I want on my website. But what I want to realize is when I do that, I give my authority to that website, right? I'm actually doing them a favor. So I want to make sure that I'm doing that for people that are worthwhile. And in a lot of times I want to have partners that really understand that every time I gave you a link, I helped you. Because if they understand that, they're going to be better at possibly linking back to our website for different reasons and exchanging that energy.
I have a question about that. What about updating older blogs?
Yeah, so updating older blogs, like I said, number one thing everybody can do, use the content you already have. Update everything, put at the top, updated March 15th, 2022. Don't change the URL, don't change the dates, don't do any of that. Just make sure everything is accurate. If you want to edit for better headings, pepper in some keywords to make it stronger, do that. And literally, I'm sure you've seen that on other blogs, like updated April 1st, 2022. That tells the reader immediately that what they're reading is accurate. But it allows you to keep the same URL, which if the blog is like 5 years old, a blog post, it could be doing great in Google. It's been around for so long. Yeah, so we just spend a lot of time refreshing blog content to make sure that it's got power.
So what do you recommend on social media? Because I know that you put the same one what the distribution rate is down for that one.
I wouldn't say that's true unless it's really close together. So I'm all for, especially when we update blogs, resharing that link. If we haven't done it in the last like month, I don't see why we get any ping for sharing it again. Yeah, there shouldn't be any negative for resharing content that you've shared in the past, especially if you've actually updated
Two questions. All right, so back to the dates, because I'm pretty sure we were told by Sympathy to change the dates to have it move up. And that's what I've been doing.
Yeah, so
Is that
the
changed?
question is, does the date change the URL? In a lot of blogs, when you change the date, it actually sometimes changes the URL, and I would say you don't want to do that. The older a blog post is with the same URL, the more authority it's building.
It is not, we're just changing it in the title, so I'm like.
Yeah, if it's just in the title and it's not affecting the URL, then that should be fine. But the truth is, you don't have to change the dates. You can just update them potentially. It's really, if the key is in just having that move up to the top of your blog list, so it's like displaying in the top 3 posts or whatever it is, then you might have to change the date. As long as it's not changing the URL, then it should be fine.
I don't think it is, because I know I've updated the April Walker Tours, and it still says April Walker Tours, but they have recommended too, that like put the date in, is it?
Title.
Yeah,
The
in the title and the metadata.
Well, and it's probably not affecting your REL, because I was just watching a minute ago live, it was looking at what pages, and you had some 2021 stuff that was pulling, and I feel like you just reposted probably. So.
But yeah, I'm a fan of really, like I said, just having an update listed at the top. You can do what they're saying, which is put the date in the title, put it in the metadata. You know, I don't know. I think there's some argument for like how important that is. I see blogs doing great, and all we're doing is putting one little update thing across the top and then resharing it everywhere. And we're reinvigorating. I feel like to edit metadata over, and if it's once a year, it's probably not bad. If I had things where I was having to redo metadata all the time to change dates, I would be like, this is really frustrating and a lot of work. And so I might shift away from that. But if it's like something from April of last year and you just have to adjust something, it doesn't change the URL, then you should be fine.
My URLs have the date.
So yeah, so when you change the date, if it's changing the URL, do not do it. Do not change the dates. The URL has to stay the same for you to maintain your authority for that post.
So I guess what I'm saying is like, when I do a blog post, it has the date,
Mhm.
the published date, and the URL.
Yeah.
So just keep that the same.
Yes.
And then just update it, update the content.
Just update the content and put at the top, last updated and the date that you did it. So people know that everything in there is accurate, even though it's from 2017, right? This is especially important, y'all, because of the pandemic, right? Lots of things are not the same as they were 2 years ago. So most of us that have blogs should be going through the whole blog and doing this. So people know that what's in there from 2018, 2019 is still legit, 2020 is still legit, right? Because there's so much that's changed over the last couple of years. But yeah, if the dates are in the URL, like that's a typical WordPress thing, we don't want to change it. As soon as you change that URL, you've reset the entire post. And it doesn't have any authority and it starts all over again.
Okay, so on the links, you know, like I said, I usually put, like if I mention, you know,
Yeah.
and then I'll put the link going back to their listing on our website. Would it be more beneficial for me to have it go straight to their website, or?
So that's a discussion of your goals. Is the goal to keep people on your website, or is your goal to send people to the listing members' websites? Right? That's a priority you all have to decide. There's no right or wrong. If you're trying to keep people on your website engaging, you would link them to the listing first. If the goal, though, is to have your members seeing more and more traffic coming to their websites from yours, I would give them always the option to go direct to the website.
Unless their page just isn't. Unless their page is beautiful.
Yeah. True that.
Unless, you know, it's
Yeah.
not a very good page and they're not keeping it up to date.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because there might be some people who have great websites where it's worth it to have a link to their listing and a link to their website. And there might be other businesses where you're like, yeah, that website's no bueno. So we're gonna make sure that we send them to the listing, get the information, or maybe they don't have one at all. So yeah, so you could take it on a case by case.
Yes, I say it just would benefit the visitors.
And I do want to throw out, because the reason why this isn't really an SEO thing is because it's the user experience, right? Like more than just like optimization, it's about if somebody's on the listing and there is a really good website for them to go to, is it really fair to make them an extra click? because that's what you're asking them to do by sending them to the listing. Then they gotta click the website, right? So it's like for the person, is it easier for them, especially for a business that has an awesome website, that we can just get them directly there? And does that benefit the member as well? And if it does, then you might want to just include both. So video optimization, again, if you're creating videos, again, I use keyword research to come up with video ideas. I love this about keyword research, right? It gives me, hold on one second. It gives me a lot of different ways to come up with what kind of videos should we create, right? Not just blog titles and things like that, but I might be able to do video content instead. So for those of you that are smaller teams, if you're not a great writer, think about how all this becomes video content and gets posted. And then some people hate video, they're better at writing, they prefer that. But both of them will have value, especially if you're using the keyword research to come up with the titles of the video and using the keywords in the description.
One other point, a lot of times when we click into somebody else's website, then we can't ever get back to our own website.
There's a way you can tell it to open any window.
Okay.
Yeah. Instead of telling it to,
But some of the people, like some people browsing through there don't realize that. Or well, when it opens a whole new window, another one's still open behind it.
Yeah, so that's a setting that when you're running a website, you want to actually say open in a new window, so that way when they close that other website, your website is still sitting there right beneath it. There's some arguments back and forth, but again, for ADA purposes with the American Disabilities Act, opening things in a new window is not ideal for people who are using assistive technology, because if it opens too many windows, it gets crazy. So I do think you have to be very thoughtful when people are navigating through your own site. It should not be opening a new window every time. It should just be moving them from page to page. When they leave your website, you want to specifically make it so that they can have that still there at the end. Yeah, and that's usually just like when you create a link, it's usually like it's called setting a target. And you usually have a little drop down that'll let you make that decision to open the same window or open the new window. So I've put some great stuff in here about website usability. We didn't have time to tackle this today. We'll talk more about it in the analytics class, but I wanted you to be able to go through the slides and just really understand what a great website is. There's some great testing tools you can use as well, but this is really key. You can be doing great social media, you can be running ads, you can be writing great content on your website, but if your website is not following the usability standards, you're going to have problems. What you're going to have is traffic that doesn't convert, right? Or you're going to drive people to the website and then they're going to leave because the website is not doing what we need them to do. So, websites really need to be easy to use. They need to be uncluttered. We need to be thinking about people first. And we really need to be trying to figure out how they can get to where they need to be with as few clicks as possible. Most of the people that we're engaging with, I just want you to understand, they're using Facebook, they're using Instagram, they're using Amazon, they're using these websites that allow them to do a lot of stuff super fast in one click and have everything catered to them. So by the time they get to our websites as businesses, their expectations are kind of crazy. I blame Amazon for a lot of this. Them and their one-click purchase can just totally shove it. I feel like every other website has suffered when they got to the point where they could do one-click purchase, right? Because we're creating this world where immediate gratification is what people are used to. And for those of us that have our own websites, it's hard for us to compete against a company with like billions of dollars. And Jeff Bezos has like not only space scientists, but a bunch of people working on that website. They're getting everything down to instantaneous shopping satisfaction. So that trend is really making us pay more and more attention to how our own websites really work. And I do think too, we really want to think of our websites as storytelling opportunities, right? So it's not just about, what you do and how you do it, but it goes back to, again, that question of why. Why does your company do what it does? Why does your organization do what it does? Why does it matter? Your website really needs to connect on an emotional level to people, right? No matter what you do, no matter how boring you think it is, or how you think there's no story to tell, I'm telling you, there's always a story to tell. And people want to know why they should choose you instead of another business, another company, another organization. So we really want to infuse that into the whole experience, right? We want to build websites that really have our customer needs, limitations, expectations in mind. So I put together some basic design rules A lot of this, like I said, goes very synergistically with what we've already talked about, but really knowing the goals of your website, what role does it play, what is the purpose of each of your pages, knowing your audiences really well, and not just one giant bucket of people, but knowing that that's not actually how it is. Your audience is a bunch of smaller groups and segments of people that have different needs, and your website needs to be speaking to those different needs, different desires, different wants. And then we have to be completely responsive, which means websites have to work well on every device. And Google is a big taskmaster about this. I'll give you some Google testing tools in just a minute. But as far as mobile friendliness and page speed, Google has free tools that you can use today to test how your website is doing, test every single page of your website potentially. With layouts, like I said, we talked about scrolling. There's something that we call basically above the fold. That's, like I said, the first screen or two of content. Those are always your primary real estate places. So whatever's showing in this first screen and then maybe one scroll down on any device, that is where most people are seeing the content. Below that, like I said, we're getting down into 10 to 20% of the people are making it lower down. So when there's clickable calls to action, don't make them so far down the page. Make sure there's at least one or two things up at the top that get people to go to the next step. These are the tools you can use. Like I said, there's Google Page Speed Insights. That is a very specific tool around every page of your site. Again, when you get the slide deck, you can just click these. It'll take you right into the tools. And then they have a mobile friendly testing tool. A lot of websites you'll see are performing better on desktop than they are on mobile. So that's something to be aware of if you realize that your site is slower on mobile. Also, if you don't feel like you're getting the engagement you want, I wanted to encourage everybody to think about your color schemes. Has anybody in here ever done any like color psychology studies, or see a couple people have done it? So this is a really interesting thing to pay attention to. One of the most key things that I run into on websites, and it's funny because I'm a Libra, so don't get me wrong, I love to match. I'm one of those people where like my socks, my underwear match my outfit, even though no one will ever know it but me. There's something about that I have to do. At the same time though, when you build a website and your buttons, the clickable calls to action, and the text links match the rest of the site, what you're doing is you're making all of the clickable things invisible. So I'm a big fan in a color palette. If my color palette is greens and blues, which are cool colors, I actually need a warm color for clickable. My yellows, oranges, reds, right? Purples and greens are discussable. They're not really warm colors. Sometimes they can be in contrast enough to make a difference. But really think about, I've had some websites where we're getting people to the page, but then they're not converting, right? They're not clicking to the next thing. They're not downloading the itinerary. They're not signing up for the class. And a lot of times it can be as simple as moving a button up higher and changing the color of the button so it stands out on the page. So that's just something with color psychology I don't think enough people talk about. A good designer who understands usability should already know all this stuff. But if you build your own website or you work with somebody who hasn't taken the time, it's really important. Warmer colors are more associated with action. So those fiery colors, this is why the PayPal button is yellow, y'all. Right? They've tried to change the color. It never works as well. Right? That yellow is ugly, but you always see it, right? And now people trust it, right? So again, 90% of product assessments have to do with color. Color is 85% of the reason people purchase specific products. So it is a subconscious thing, but it's hugely influential in whether or not people take action, right? And there's no like good and bad colors. It's really just understanding like blues and greens are cool colors. They relax people, right? They make them feel comfortable. That's not always great for getting somebody to click, right? So sometimes we want to just change those things up. And then part of usability is accessibility. And that's what has to do with helping you build websites that are better for people with disabilities overall. And so accessibility has not been required by a lot of smaller companies. It's only been required by government agencies and larger corporate websites because they fall into sort of a type of business that's so public, like Walmart has to meet accessibility requirements so that anybody in the country who wants to shop on Walmart's website can do it. That has not been true for smaller businesses and organizations, but the laws are changing right now. And in about a year or two, we're going to find almost every website in the country is going to be required to meet accessibility standards. And that is a much larger conversation. If you don't know about it, start thinking about it now. It's when it comes down the pipeline. A lot of us are going to have major changes that we have to make to accommodate more people. These are some great tools that you can do tests on just to see where your website falls right now from an accessible standpoint. And this is, just to throw this out there, this is not just for people who are, they have hearing issues, they have sight issues. We do have an entire generation of baby boomers who can't see as well and can't hear as well, right? And so as people age, we actually move into this crowd of people. Gen Xers are on their way. I didn't have glasses until 2 years ago. So, it's really important to start thinking about there's millions of people that have to use the internet slightly differently because of limitations they have physically. And we want to make sure we accommodate that. And again, if you want to test if you want to set up your website to actually do heat mapping and click tracking, which shows you what buttons people are clicking on, where their eyes are falling on the page to understand your layouts better. These are some of my favorite tools for testing and using on websites. You usually have to run them for at least 3 to 6 months. Again, my favorite is Hotjar because it's compatible with almost every website I've ever used. It's just a code that you can have your designer add, but it really helps us understand, especially in our top 5 or 10 pages, are they really working for us? And if not, what is wrong, right? What are people missing? That's what allows me to decide what buttons need to change color, what things need to move to a different place, right? I'll use a lot of these tools to understand that over time. And then off page, I just wanted to talk about real quick, like I said, this is the ecosystem around your website. And again, this is like where we get into SEO being this umbrella of a million things. Earned natural links. So back in the day, we used to call it link building. And you could like buy, you could go to GoDaddy and pay them like $300. Like, we're gonna get 5,000 links to your website, right? And you pay them this money. And then you would supposedly get all these links. Usually there were websites that looked crazy. They were like link farms. If you clicked on them, there was just like thousands of links on a page, right? So Google made all of that illegal, like in 2005. They were like, this is trash. They're like, we're getting rid of this. This is gaming the system. We don't like it, right? If I can just buy links, I'm not proving my credibility or my authority. I'm just paying, So they were like, we really want to focus on earned natural links. So what does this mean? It means that public relations is really important, right? Getting media coverage, talking to influencers, partnering with other brands and businesses that will link back to you. Doing all of this stuff that we sort of consider old school really matters because it's those relationships and those actual natural earned links that you get when other people's websites link to your website saying, this company is amazing, this product they offer is great, this experience that they provide people is really worth it, go and buy it. Every time any other website does that for your website, they are doing you a massive favor. And the stronger that website is, the more popular it is, the more traffic it has, the more value it has. So when I get a link from a media outlet, that link is worth like 20 or 50 other links, right? Because media websites are considered higher up on the scale of things. If you work with a university or college and they link to your company at any point, that's like magical gold. Because higher education, they do not give out links to anything. They have a lot of specifics you have to meet to ever get a link from like a .edu website. It's a big deal. That is like worth like 100 other links at once, right? Government websites. If a government website will link over to your website, it is worth hundreds of other links because they know .govs do not link out to people very often, right? So big media outlets, influencers that have thousands of people on their website or blog, all of these types of websites, the higher quality they are, the higher the impact that that one link will have on your authority, right? So this is where really figuring out different ways that you can do this is valuable. So like I said, link building, we've talked about this. It's really about those backlinks, which is links that are coming to your website. You can link out to anybody you want, but that's not really where the magic happens. If you are a physical location, there's something called local SEO. which allows you, it's a strategy for optimizing your physical location. This is where you can list yourself on sites like TripAdvisor, Yelp, even Facebook falls in this category, Google My Business, Urban Spoon. There's all these different industry websites out there. If you put up your listing with your name, address, phone number, and website link, that will actually build the authority of your physical location and help you show up higher in the local results. So if you guys want to, you can pull out your phones right now. You can actually Google your own organization or business, right? You're going to see a lot of times you get results similar to this. If you're on your phone, though, it'll also have a click to call option, right? So local listings actually dominate phones. If you go on, like I said, to your Google app right now and search for something, you're going to get these sort of map listings right at the top. They're the primary thing that they show you, because when they detect that you're on your mobile device, they assume that you're looking for something geo-targeted to where you're standing, right? And so a lot of times, like I said, you'll see website, directions, click to call, and that allows me to navigate a whole bunch of stuff right in what is called Google My Business. Google My Business is a listing. You can claim it and verify it. If you've never done it for your physical location, you should. That will allow you to actually have total control over your listing, to post things to it, share links to your website, add photos and videos, answer your reviews. You'll get a link so you can ask people to review you on Google. You'll get a number of different things built into the system that are super helpful for, like I said, what we call local search engine optimization. Yahoo and Bing also have their own version of this. I don't prioritize it as much as Google, but if we have a physical brick and mortar location, I'm often going to fill out as many of these local listings as I can, so that people will come straight to the store, straight to the office, things like that. And I've put in some links for Google My Business so you can explore this. Again, during lunch, if anybody's got questions, you can let me know. And then Moz has its own version of this. If you have name, address, phone number, it's what we call NAP. Google requires that your NAP is the same everywhere. Your name, address, and phone number should be the same on Facebook. It should be the same on your website. It should be the same on Yelp or TripAdvisor or anywhere else that you're listing the physical address. So name, address, phone number, Google is going to judge you on how consistent you are. If there's inconsistencies, you can use tools like Moz Local, and there's another one called Bright Local. These tools allow you to see if there's discrepancies in your NAP, right? It'll actually scrape the web, find places where the name, address, phone number are not the same, and then help you get direction on how to correct that issue.
What if we have, like on social media, we're Visit North Alabama instead of Alabama Mountain Tourist Association. But I mean, there's Alabama Mountain Tourist Association on our social media. Is that going to make a huge difference?
We're just talking about the domain, right? Or are we talking about like the name of all your pages, or what are we talking about?
Well, so like on Google My Business, I looked up Alabama Mountain Lakes and it came up. And it was pulling photos, it looked like, from social media as well.
Well, it pulls photos from users and from what you post.
Okay.
So it's user-generated content.
So if we're Visit North Alabama on social, is that going to penalize us?
Are you talking about the handle? So like your handle of your Facebook and Instagram or Visit North Alabama?
Yes.
All right. So the key is on Facebook though, when you put in the address, the phone number, and all that into the back end, is that accurate to the website?
Oh, okay.
Right? So yeah, handles are a different thing.
Okay.
Because
so
that's
we're
just
good.
the, yeah, the handles.
But y'all
not what I'm
guys
talking
the same way. Y'all got it, yeah.
Yeah, I'm talking more about like in Instagram is a good example too. I put in business information in the back end, and then I have public information on the front end, right? What matters is that back end, like legal sort of information, that it's all accurate. So again, online PR. Is anybody here doing public relations on a regular basis? Awesome. So anytime you're talking to reporters and you're getting stories, ask for the link. They don't just give it away. You have to ask for it. They might say, no, we don't link to people. That's fine, but at least you asked. But if you don't ask, nobody's ever linking to you. So please ask the reporters about it. How can you make sure when they talk about you in an article, there's a link to your website, or if they interview you on the radio, or they interview you for TV, asking for it is the key thing you have to do. Again, policy might say no, but it's worth it. And then e-newsletters, which I think are a little bit separate from this. And like I said, I do feel like from a content perspective, we want to link all this back to be cohesive. I think e-newsletters, even though Google understands you're the one sending them out, it's a really good idea to link people back to your website at least 2 or 3 times in your newsletter, right? Have an article that then links them back to the full blog post, or have something that you want to feature on your website in each newsletter. Again, because what that's going to do is hopefully drive traffic to the website. If that traffic clicks over from your email, stays on your website for like 4 minutes and looks at 3 pages, that's actually building your authority, right? So the link doesn't matter as much because it's really you linking to yourself, but it's the activity generated by the link, right? That shows how strong your website is. Same thing for social media. So again, when you link from Facebook to your own website, from Twitter to your own website, Google knows that's you linking to you. You don't get credit for linking to yourself, right? They're like, that's not the same as other people doing it. But if you can get people to click over from Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and Pinterest, they come to your website and they engage, that is building your authority, right? So that's where we see that relationship between the ecosystem. And the same thing again is true of partnerships, influencers. If you can get influencers to talk about you on their social media and link to your website and you drive a bunch of great traffic, that's upping your authority, right? If you have another partner in your industry that you can work with, like a museum, someone else, and you all start talking on social media about each other and it drives some traffic, that's actually going to build the authority of the website as those people engage. And again, same thing with YouTube, Vimeo videos, all that video work that you do. Again, I always, in my descriptions of videos, I put in at least 1 to 3 links to my website, right? So I'll usually link them to another blog post that's similar to the video topic. I might link them to a page on the website that's similar to the topic. But that way I'm really kind of creating this cohesive ecosystem, and I'm attaching different keyword topics to different parts of my website through all of this off-page channel work. And then, like I said, I know we're wrapping up right now. The last thing I just wanted to show everybody is the Google Search Console. And I've put in a bunch of information about this so that you can dig in and kind of see. We're going to talk about tracking this afternoon. But the main thing I wanted to share with you was the Google Search Console, because most people have not used this. And I find it to be one of the best tools in my toolkit. It's free from Google. You do have to sign up for the Search Console. They give you a little tag that you have to have somebody add to your website. And once it's added, it will pull in this data. My favorite thing about this is 2 things. One, this is going to show me, let's get back to something with more data in it. This is going to show me 2 things that really matter. There's a lot of stuff in here, but there's 2 things that are the most important. One is this performance area. This is where I am going to see every keyword phrase that I'm ranking for on Google. You can see here I'm ranking for over 200. So we're going to drop this down so you can see them all. And so these are what we call my keyword queries, right? So it's showing me all these specific things that my result actually showed in Google for those topics, right? In this other column, it's showing me how many people clicked on my result. So I can see how many times our website showed up for these phrases. Then I can see how many times compared to how often it showed up did it get clicked on, right? And then the ratio between impressions and clicks is the click-through rate, right? And so it's really telling me right away, where are we showing up for different things? And I can organize basically by position. And so like right now, anything number 2 through 10 means on average, the website shows up for that on number page 1 on average, right? It's never the same every day, but on average, it's on page 1. If things are between 11 and 20, that means I'm on average showing up on page 2. If things are between 21 and 30, on average, I'm showing up on page 3. So I can really start to identify my keyword value, right? Where do I have traction? What topics am I already showing up high? What topics am I already on page 2 or 3 or 4? Because those are opportunity topics, right? The other thing I can do in here is click on pages. And now I can see the pages of my website that are doing the best on Google. And this is where I want to take a look at this because I don't want to delete these pages. I don't want to be like, this is old, we're getting rid of it. No, not until we look at this. Because if something old is showing up on page 1 of Google again and you delete it, we just turn off the faucet, right? And we don't want to do that. We might want to update the page instead and keep it around, right? We might want to update the page and say, hey, we're not doing this anymore. This event isn't happening now, but here's another great event that you should check out, right? So we can still get that flow of traffic and then move them into something else. So I'm really against deleting old content without real evaluation of the value of that content. Because sometimes you'll have a blog post that's like 7 years old and you don't realize it's driving like 400 people a month to your website. Right? And it's because that topic was maybe something that nobody else had really written about when you wrote about it. And over time, content builds up more authority the longer that it's live and the longer that the URL stays the same. Right? So every page of your website, you can actually see in here. And then also when you launch a new website, like we talked about, if you do the URL inspection, you put the URL into that area and you click return. It is an invite to Google to index your new content. So we're not waiting for Google bots to do it when they feel like it. We're actually saying, hey, this page, take a look at it and index it. So when I create new content, I plug it into here. When I create a new website, I put every single URL in here, right? Because to me, it's like inviting Google to the party for a new website. It's like, otherwise, I'm just gonna wait for Google to care that we launched a new site. This is my tool for saying, hey, we're ready. The one caveat is don't put pages in here if they say coming soon, because Google's going to be like, excuse me, this is not ready. Why are you telling me to send people here and index it when the page is not fully functional, right? So we want to make sure anything we're submitting here is really strong. There's also a couple areas in here like coverage. This is where you can see errors on your website and anything that Google is identifying as a problem. So I check this regularly on websites that I'm optimizing because a lot of times I didn't build them. And I need to go through and make sure that we don't have any problems with what Google is seeing. And so this is a great way to monitor things and just, especially when you're doing big changes on a website, to make sure it's not interrupting what Google understands. And the final thing that's awesome about this website, about this particular tool, is if once this is installed, you might only get hacked once in like 20 years, but if you have this tool, when you get hacked, Google will send you a message and it will be like, we have detected something bad on the website, malware, injected code, whatever. It'll actually tell your developer, your designer, here's where you've been infected, right? It'll put a little alert on the website results in Google that tells people something's wrong, right? So that your own audiences that are finding you don't click on your website and then get themselves infected with malware or a hack, right? So this tool for me as a web designer, I'll just say number one thing, because most people when they call it a hack, if we don't have this, it's called, we just look to solve the problem and we just bill you for however long it takes, right? Which could be anything. It could take my coder 2 hours to fix it, or it could take them 20, I don't know. This is us trying to figure out why hackers are ruining our lives, right? We don't know. It could be anything big or small. With this tool, Google says, here's the problem. I'm like, cool, we'll have that cleaned up in 1 hour, right? So it literally, even though you might never get hacked, like you said, once every 2 or 3 decades, when you do though, this saves you massive amounts of money. And it also protects your own website visitors from having something infect their computer or cause their phone to have some problems and things like that. So that's like, even if you weren't going to do SEO, I install this on every website that I build. And because I'm an administrator along with the clients, it's funny, not only do they get a message that the site's been hacked, but I get it. So a lot of times I get the message and I'm like, yo, your website's hacked. Do you want me to take care of it? And they're like, yeah, I didn't read that email yet. And I'm like, I know, I read them because I know sometimes they're letting us know something's going on. But I would definitely suggest if anybody has questions about Google Search Console, let me know. Like I said, it's pretty easy to install. I would just need to know kind of what your website platform is and give you some direction on that. But it's really worthwhile, totally free. And I think a super useful tool for understanding how Google sees what you're doing. But I know we are right a little over. Thank you all so much because we started a little late. Go ahead and eat your lunch, but I will answer any other questions.
So when you're on the performance part and you have the pages pulled up, how does that compare to when you're on analytics and you're looking at users versus non-users?
I mean, it's just completely separate.
I mean, is it kind of the same numbers?
No, they're totally different tools. This is not tracking your website traffic. It's just tracking how your website is seen by Google. So it's tracking search results in Google, not anything that's happening on the website itself, right? So that's where Google Analytics is tracking what people do on your website, how they got there, and how they're leaving, and how they're converting. Search Console is showing you what Google understands about your brand and your website in particular, and how it shows up in the results. So it's just two totally different perspectives. Sometimes you'll see if you went into Google Analytics and went into channels, organic search, right? And then went into landing pages, that would sometimes similarly correlate to what we looked at today. Because that's landing pages, we're getting traffic from organic search. The discrepancy will be Google Analytics covers all the search engines, Bing, Yahoo, all the other ones. This is only touching Google. So it's not going to show you anything from Bing or Yahoo.
Well, that was just SEO basics. Can you imagine what you could do if we let her get into deep SEO? So after lunch, we're going to do Google Analytics, which I know all of us could use a little help with, but I'm going to bless our food right quick. Heavenly Father, we just come to you today. We just thank you, Lord. We thank you for this day. We thank you for the opportunity to come and learn to better our industry. We just want to thank you for this food, Lord. We ask you to bless it, use it to the nourishment of our bodies, and satisfaction of our home. We thank you so much. In my name, amen. And in case you haven't found out yet, the bathrooms are just down past the elevators in the lobby.